Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash mastered every battle gimmick, Mega, Z moves, Dynamax and Terastal. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Champion's Symphony. The world was a single, deafening roar. It pressed in from all sides, a physical weight of sound that vibrated through the soles of Ash's boots and up into his chest. 80,000 people, with 80,000 voices, were screaming his name, and the sound was indistinguishable from the name of his opponent. It was just noise, pure and elemental. In the center of that storm, on the vibrant green of the Winden Stadium pitch, there was a perfect, crystalline silence. Across from him, Cynthia smiled. It was a small, knowing expression, the kind shared between two people who understood the language of the tempest about to be unleashed. Her long blonde hair was held back by the iconic black ornaments, and her gray eyes, usually warm and analytical, now held the sharp focus of a predator. Beside her, her Garchomp mirrored the expression, its powerful body coiled like a spring, its gaze locked on Pikachu. "It has been a long time, Ash." Cynthia's voice was clear and calm, cutting through the din without the aid of a microphone. It was a testament to the focus they both shared, a bubble of concentration in the heart of the hurricane. "Not long enough for you to go easy on me, I hope," Ash replied, the corner of his mouth ticking upward. Pikachu's cheeks sparked, a low, eager crackle that was his only response. The little mouse Pokémon was a knot of condensed energy, his body thrumming with the same anticipation as the crowd. The referee's flag shot up, and the world seemed to hold its breath. The roar dipped for a microsecond, a collective inhale before the plunge. "Let the exhibition match begin." The flag came down, the roar exploded. Garchomp, Dragon Rush. Pikachu, Quick Attack. Let's test the waters. The two Pokémon became blurs of yellow and blue. Garchomp hurtled forward, a draconic missile wrapped in searing azure energy. Pikachu was a lightning bolt, skimming the surface of the manicured grass, weaving left and right. The collision was a thunderclap of raw power. Pikachu, impossibly agile, used Garchomp's massive head as a springboard, flipping backward and landing lightly on his feet, his cheeks already sparking with greater intensity. Garchomp, barely phased, skidded to a halt, carving deep furrows into the pitch. This was the opening dance, the exchange of pleasantries before the blades were truly drawn. Cynthia was a master of overwhelming force, of using Garchomp's sheer power to dictate the pace of a battle. But Ash was no longer the boy who charged in headfirst. He was a master of rhythm, of finding the empty spaces between the hammer blows. Iron Head, Pikachu. Stay close. Pikachu shot forward again, his tail glowing with a metallic sheen. He was too fast for Garchomp to track up close, a gadfly buzzing around a dragon. He landed a glancing blow on Garchomp's flank, the clang of steel on scale echoing through the stadium. "Annoying," Cynthia murmured, a flicker of appreciation in her eyes, but not enough. Garchomp, Stone Edge. Garchomp roared, stomping its foot. Razor-sharp pillars of glowing blue rock erupted from the ground, chasing Pikachu like guided missiles. The crowd gasped as the yellow mouse ducked and weaved, the stones shattering against the turf where he'd been a fraction of a second before. He was cornered. A wall of stone erupted in front of him, and two more closed in from the sides. "Now, brick break," Cynthia commanded. Garchomp's fin-like arm glowed with white energy as it slashed down at the trapped Pikachu. "Wouldn't be a battle with you if I didn't have to think on my feet," Ash said, his voice level. He touched the brim of his cap. "Pikachu, use the stone, Electro Ball." Pikachu didn't panic. He leapt onto the face of the stone pillar, his body a conduit for crackling electricity. He spun, gathering a massive orb of golden energy at his tail, and fired it point blank. The Electro Ball collided with Garchomp's brick break in a blinding flash of white and gold. The explosion ripped the stone pillar apart, sending shrapnel across the field. Both Pokémon were thrown back by the shockwave. They landed, breathing heavily, and stared each other down. The first exchange was over. It was a draw. "You've learned patience," Cynthia observed, her smile widening. "I've had good teachers," Ash shot back, returning the smile. But the easy banter was done. It was time to change the tempo. "Pikachu, return." He recalled the electric mouse in a flash of red light, the crowd murmuring in surprise. To pull back his strongest partner so early was a strange move. Ash already had his next Pokeball in hand. Lucario, I need you. The Aura Pokemon materialized in a crouch, his crimson eyes already locked on Garchomp. The energy in the stadium shifted. This wasn't just a battle of types anymore, it was a battle of legends. Cynthia's eyes narrowed. An interesting choice. Very well. Garchomp, Dragon Claw. Lucario, don't let it touch you, Extreme Speed. Lucario was motion. He flowed across the field, a blue and black wraith that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. Garchomp's claws, glowing with spectral green energy, swiped at empty air. Lucario was behind it, then beside it, a phantom dancing just outside the dragon's reach. Ash felt the familiar thrum of energy building within him, a connection that went deeper than words. He could feel Lucario's focus, his readiness. He raised his left wrist, tapping the key stone embedded in his mega glove. A brilliant, multicolored light erupted from the stone, lancing across the field to connect with the Lucarionite on his Pokemon's wrist. Lucario. Let our spirits become one, Mega Evolve. The crowd's roar reached a fever pitch. A sphere of dazzling rainbow light enveloped Lucario. His form shifted, stretched, grew more streamlined and dangerous. The cream-colored fur on his torso expanded, black markings appeared on his limbs, and the sensory appendages on the back of his head grew longer, twitching as they took in the world with a new, profound level of perception. When the light faded, Mega Lucario stood in his place, his eyes glowing with the fierce, focused light of a warrior in his prime. The aura emanating from him was a visible, rippling heatwave. Incredible, the announcer's voice boomed over the stadium speakers, barely audible over the crowd. Ash Ketchum wastes no time in bringing out his first ace. Mega Lucario is on the field. In a dark, silent room far from the cheering masses, a man watched the broadcast on a towering screen. The room was opulent but severe, furnished with dark wood and polished silver. The only light came from the screen, casting long, dancing shadows. The man, Valerius, stood with his back to a handful of followers, his hands clasped behind him. He was tall and imposing, with silver hair cut in a sharp, militant style and a face that looked as though it were carved from granite. His eyes, a piercing shade of violet, were fixed on the image of Mega Lucario. Look at it, Valerius said, his voice a low, resonant rumble. A perversion. A shortcut. He forces that creature into a state of agonizing power, twisting its natural form for his own glory. One of his followers, a young woman with a fervent gleam in her eyes, nodded sharply. It is a corruption of the sacred bond, Master Valerius. A crutch for trainers who lack true conviction. It is more than a crutch, Alara, Valerius corrected, his gaze unwavering. It is a disease, a plague of power that has infected the very soul of Pokemon battling. And this boy, this Ash Ketchum, he is the avatar of that plague. He watched as Mega Lucario moved with impossible speed, a blur of motion that even the high-definition cameras struggled to follow. He does not simply use the disease. He cultivates it, he revels in it, and the world celebrates him for it. Back in the stadium, the battle had become a masterclass in speed and strategy. Aura Sphere, Ash commanded. Mega Lucario thrust his palms forward, launching a sphere of crackling blue energy. But Cynthia was ready. Garchomp, dodge and use Sandstorm. Garchomp sidestepped the blast and whipped its tail in a circle, kicking up a swirling vortex of sand that quickly engulfed the entire field. Visibility dropped to near zero. The crowd groaned, their view obscured. A classic move from the Sinnoh champion. The announcer declared, she's robbed Mega Lucario of its visual advantage. Ash smirked. She thinks we need to see. He closed his eyes, extending his own senses, feeling the thrum of the battle through his bond with Lucario. He could feel Garchomp's position, a spike of aggressive energy moving through the swirling sand. He could feel Lucario's calm, unwavering focus. They didn't need eyes. They had aura. He's coming from your right, Lucario. Bone rush, now. Inside the sandstorm, there was a flash of blue light. Mega Lucario, his eyes closed, spun on his heel, a staff of pure energy materializing in his hands. He swung it in a perfect arc, intercepting Garchomp's dragon claw with a resounding crack. The dragon roared in surprise and pain. Impossible. Cynthia exclaimed, her composure finally cracking. "We can feel you, Cynthia," Ash called out, his voice ringing with confidence. "This is our battle now. Force palm." Lucario dropped the energy staff and lunged forward, his palm glowing with blinding white light. He struck Garchomp square in the chest. The sandstorm dissipated instantly from the force of the blow, revealing Garchomp staggering backward, its body crackling with static. Paralyzed. "Now, close it out." Aura Sphere. Mega Lucario leapt into the air, charging a massive sphere of energy between his palms. It pulsed with power, a miniature sun of pure aura. But Cynthia wasn't a champion for nothing. "Garchomp, use your pain. Break through the paralysis." Giga Impact. With a guttural roar that shook the stadium, Garchomp was enveloped in a maelstrom of purple and gold energy. It shook off the paralysis through sheer force of will and launched itself upward, a living comet aimed straight at the descending Lucario. The two attacks met in the center of the stadium. The explosion was titanic. A dome of white light expanded, silencing the 80,000 screaming fans. When it cleared, Mega Lucario was standing, panting heavily, while Garchomp lay unconscious on the scorched earth below. The referee's arm shot up. "Garchomp is unable to battle." The silence was broken by a wave of sound that was even more powerful than before. Ash had taken the first round, defeating a champion's ace with his own. Cynthia recalled Garchomp, her expression unreadable. "Your connection, it's stronger than ever. To fight without sight, to predict my every move. We've been through a lot," Ash said, as Lucario reverted to his normal form, giving Ash a tired but satisfied nod. Ash recalled him, giving the Pokeball a grateful pat. "But you're just getting warmed up, aren't you?" "Of course," Cynthia said, a true, predatory smile finally gracing her lips. She drew her next Pokeball. But raw power and bonds can be overcome by tactical superiority. "Melodic, your stage." The elegant sea serpent materialized in a shower of sparkles, its long, beautiful body coiled and ready. Its presence immediately cooled the air, a stark contrast to the fiery battle that had just concluded. "A tough opponent," Ash mused. He looked at the Pokeball in his hand, then back at the battlefield. He needed to change the flow again. Keep Cynthia off balance. "Okay. Snorlax, I choose you." The ground shook as the massive Pokémon appeared, letting out a great yawn before settling into a battle stance. The crowd chuckled. Snorlax was a fan favorite, but putting the slow, lumbering giant against the swift and graceful Melodic seemed like a tactical error. Valerius watched from his dark room, a sneer twisting his lips. Now comes the abomination of Galar. The grotesque inflation of power. Watch, Alara. See how he brutalizes his own Pokémon, forcing it into a monstrous caricature of itself. "Melodic, scald," Cynthia commanded. A jet of boiling water shot across the field. Snorlax took the hit head-on, grunting in annoyance but otherwise seeming unfazed by the super-effective attack. "We can take a few of those," Ash said confidently. He raised his right hand, revealing a black wristband with a red crystal embedded in it, the Dynamax band. "Snorlax, it's time to get huge." He recalled Snorlax, and the Pokeball in his hand began to swell to comical proportions. He reared back and hurled it toward the center of the field. Gigantamax. The ball cracked open, releasing a torrent of swirling red energy. The ground trembled violently as Snorlax's form began to grow, and grow, and grow. It pushed past the limits of a normal Dynamax, its shape altering. A massive tree with berry-laden branches sprouted from its belly. When the transformation was complete, Gigantamax Snorlax towered over the stadium, its shadow eclipsing everything. Its roar was a physical force, a bass note that rattled the very foundations of the building. Cynthia had to crane her neck to look up at it. "Impressive in scale," she noted, her voice steady. "But a larger target is still just a target." Melodic, Hydro Pump. Melodic unleashed a colossal torrent of water, a veritable river that slammed into Snorlax's massive belly. The giant Pokémon barely budged. "Our turn. G-Max replenish," Ash yelled, his voice straining to be heard over the thrum of Dynamax energy. Snorlax raised its massive arm and swiped it across its body. A wave of golden energy washed over it, and a shower of citrus berries rained down on its side of the field, some of which it nonchalantly plucked from the tree on its belly and ate, visibly restoring its health. He's not just attacking, he's sustaining himself. The announcer shrieked with excitement. A battle of attrition is not one you can win against Snorlax, Ash stated. Now, Max quake. Snorlax raised its fists and slammed them into the ground. The entire stadium pitched and rolled like a ship in a storm. The earth itself cracked and split, and a wave of seismic energy tore across the field. Melodic, despite its grace, was thrown into the air, crashing hard against the stadium's energy shield. Melodic, hang in there. Use Ice Beam. From the ground, the injured Pokémon fired a beam of pure cold at the giant. The attack struck Snorlax's leg, encasing it in a thick layer of ice, but it was like throwing a pebble at a mountain. It's over, Cynthia. G-Max replenish, one more time. This time, the attack wasn't aimed at Snorlax itself. The giant Pokémon swept its hand across the field, and a wave of restorative energy and berries flew not at itself, but at the ground. It was an unheard of application of the move. Cynthia's eyes widened in realization. What are you? The move wasn't meant to heal. It was a physical assault. The volley of giant berries struck Melodic like a salvo of cannonballs, overwhelming the elegant Pokémon and knocking it out. As Snorlax shrank back to its normal size, the stadium was in a state of stunned silence for a moment before erupting once more. Ash had used a Gigantamax exclusive move in a way no one had ever seen before, not for its stated effect, but as a brute force attack. That was an unprecedented use of a G-Max move. The announcer stammered. Ash Ketchum is literally rewriting the rulebook in this match. Valerius slammed his fist onto the polished wooden table in front of him. A silver cup rattled and fell, spilling water across the surface. Rewriting the rules, he is defiling them. He treats these sacred powers as mere tools, to be twisted and misused for his own vulgar spectacle. This is not mastery, it is blasphemy. His followers murmured in agreement, their faces a mixture of anger and disgust. The world is blind, Valerius declared, turning to face them, his violet eyes burning with cold fire. They cheer for their own corruption. They celebrate the decay of tradition, of honor. They have elevated this child to the status of a god, but he is a false idol. And it falls to us, the Order of the Adamant Orb, to tear him down from his hollow throne. Back in the stadium, Cynthia recalled Melodic, a thoughtful frown on her face. She was down 2 Pokémon to Ash's 0. This was no longer just an exhibition. It was a statement. You have grown more than I could have imagined, Ash, she said, her voice laced with genuine admiration and a hint of frustration. Your creativity is boundless. She took her 3rd Pokeball. But every battle has a turning point. Spiritomb, let's bring some chaos. The odd keystone Pokémon appeared on the field, its ghostly face swirling with malevolent glee. 108 spirits bound to a single stone, a vortex of unpredictable power. Ash looked from Spiritomb to Snorlax, who was already starting to look sleepy. He recalled his giant partner. You earned a good long rest. Thanks, Snorlax. He looked down at his belt. He had options, but against a ghost type as tricky as Spiritomb, he needed something special. He needed a bond that was forged in shadow and speed. Greninja, let's go. The ninja frog Pokémon appeared in a blur of motion, landing in a low crouch with its arms crossed, its long tongue scarf trailing behind it. The crowd roared its approval. The legend of Ash Greninja was known throughout the world, even though the form hadn't been seen in years. Are you going to show us that form again, Ash? Cynthia asked, a challenging glint in her eye. The so-called bond phenomenon. Ash shook his head. We don't need it. We've found new ways to be strong together. It was true. The battle bond was a part of him and Greninja, an unbreakable connection, but they had learned it was not the only path to power. It was one color in a vast spectrum. We'll see, Cynthia said. Spiritomb, Will-O-Wisp. Orbs of purple fire shot toward Greninja. Double team, then water shuriken. Greninja's form blurred, splitting into a dozen identical copies that scattered across the field, the ghostly flames passing through the illusions. Every copy of Greninja then hurled spinning stars of compressed water at the real Spiritomb. Protect. A green barrier flared around Spiritomb, deflecting the shurikens. But Ash wasn't aiming to do damage. He was setting the stage. Now, Pikachu. Back on the field. While Spiritomb was defending, Ash swapped Greninja out, and Pikachu landed on the grass before the shield had even fully faded. A mid-attack switch, Cynthia said, surprised. Clever. But you're only delaying the inevitable. Spiritomb, Shadow Ball. A large sphere of churning dark energy formed in front of Spiritomb and rocketed toward Pikachu. Ash grinned. This was the moment he'd been waiting for. He thrust his arm forward, his Z-ring flaring to life. The Electrium Z crystal embedded within it began to glow with an incandescent light. He crossed his arms, struck a pose, and felt the familiar, surging power of Alola flow through him, a warmth like the island sun. Pikachu, let's show them the full power of our bond. 10 million volt thunderbolt. Pikachu leapt high into the air, his body arcing with electricity. He absorbed the power from Ash's Z-ring, and the air crackled with ozone. A rainbow of colored energy swirled around him as he unleashed a storm of lightning bolts, each one more powerful than the last. They converged on the incoming Shadow Ball, obliterating it in an instant, and continued on, a tidal wave of pure electrical fury that slammed into Spiritomb. The resulting explosion was a supernova of light and sound. When it faded, Spiritomb was gone, its keystone cracked and smoking on the ground. Cynthia was speechless for a full second before recalling her Pokémon. She looked at Ash, at the calm, confident young man standing where a reckless boy used to be, and she simply nodded. She had one Pokémon left. He had 3, and had already showcased 3 different battle gimmicks with flawless execution. You are truly on another level, Ash, she finally said, her voice filled with an awe she rarely showed. But this match is not over. Roserade, it's up to you. Her final Pokémon, the elegant bouquet Pokémon, appeared, a rose in each hand. A powerful grass and poison type, a deadly sweeper in the right hands. Ash recalled Pikachu, giving his partner a proud look. Incredible, buddy, as always. He turned his attention back to the field. He had Lucario, Snorlax, and Greninja. The obvious choice was Snorlax, whose thick hide could resist Roserade's attacks. The strategic choice was Lucario, whose steel typing gave it an edge. But Ash was here to make a statement. Greninja, let's finish this. The frog Pokémon was back on the field, its gaze steady. A water type against a grass type. Bold, Ash, or foolish, Cynthia noted. Roserade, petal dance. Roserade began to spin, creating a whirlwind of razor-sharp pink petals that blanketed the entire field. It was a beautiful and deadly storm. Greninja, use your speed. Cut through them. Greninja drew 2 kunai of compressed water and plunged into the maelstrom. It was a dervish of blue and white, a blur of motion that sliced through the petals, turning the deadly attack into a harmless, beautiful flurry of confetti. Greninja moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, a warrior poet in the heart of the storm. But as the petal dance subsided, Greninja was breathing heavily. The effort had taken a toll, and Roserade was glowing with a faint red aura, confused from the prolonged dance but still standing. Now, Sludge Bomb, Cynthia ordered, seizing the moment of exhaustion. Roserade fired a volley of toxic brown sludge. Greninja was too tired to dodge them all. Several splattered against its body, and it cried out, the poison coursing through its veins. It stumbled, dropping to one knee. The crowd gasped. Was this it? Was the tide finally turning? Ash watched, his expression serene. We knew that would happen, Greninja. But it doesn't matter, because we have one more surprise. He reached to a chain around his neck, hidden beneath his jacket. He pulled it out, revealing a small, crystalline sphere that pulsed with an inner light, a Terra Orb. It was a gift from his time in Paldea, a power he had learned to master with the same intuition he had for all the others. The poison doesn't matter when you can change your very essence, Ash said, his voice resonating with a strange power. He held the orb aloft. Greninja, it's time to shine, Terastal eyes. He threw the orb. It hovered above Greninja, unleashing a wave of crystalline energy. Greninja's body became like faceted glass, and a shimmering, ornate chandelier-like crown appeared above its head. The crown wasn't water, or dark. It was a brilliant, jagged shape of pure steel. What is that? The announcer screamed, losing all professional composure. A steel Terra type, unbelievable. Cynthia's jaw dropped. The poison from Sludge Bomb was now completely ineffective against Greninja's new steel typing. All of Roserade's grass-type moves were now resisted. She had been led into a perfect trap. Greninja, Ash's voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it carried across the silent stadium. Night Slash. Greninja's eyes snapped open, glowing with a renewed fire. It vanished. In the next instant, it was behind Roserade, its hand glowing with a blade of dark energy that was now infused with the properties of steel. It slashed once. The movement was clean, precise, and utterly final. Roserade stood frozen for a moment before slumping to the ground, defeated. The Terastal energy faded from Greninja as the referee raised his flag for the final time. Roserade is unable to battle. The winner of the exhibition match is Ash Ketchum. For a moment, there was absolute silence. The 80,000 people in the stadium were processing what they had just witnessed. It wasn't just a victory. It was a symphony, a seamless, breathtaking performance where four distinct, powerful forms of battle energy had been woven together into a single, cohesive masterpiece. Mega Evolution for strategy, Gigantamax for overwhelming power, AZ Move for a decisive blow, and Terastalization for the final, brilliant checkmate. Then, the roar came. It was a sound beyond sound, a physical wave of pure adulation that shook the sky. Ash walked onto the field and knelt beside Greninja, who was struggling to stand, the poison still taking its toll despite the type change. He fed it a Pecha berry, and Pikachu hopped down from his shoulder to pat the frog Pokemon's back. Cynthia approached them, a look of profound respect on her face. "That wasn't a battle, Ash," she said, her voice filled with a quiet awe. "That was art." Ash looked up and smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "I just trust them," he said, looking at his Pokemon. "All of them. They know what to do." Later, after the press conferences and the award ceremony, Ash finally found himself in the quiet sanctuary of the champion's locker room. The distant cheers of the crowd were a muted hum through the concrete walls. He sank onto a bench, the adrenaline finally draining away, leaving a profound weariness in its place. Pikachu curled up in his lap, already dozing. The weight of his own legend felt heavier in the silence. The door opened softly. Serena stood there, a warm smile on her face that did more to soothe his frayed nerves than anything else could. She didn't rush in, didn't gush with praise. She just stood there, her presence a calm anchor in his chaotic world. "You left them speechless," she said, her voice a gentle melody. She walked over and sat beside him, her shoulder brushing against his. "I was just having fun," he mumbled, though they both knew it was more than that. It was a validation of every journey, every loss, every bond he had ever formed. "I know," she said. She reached out and gently brushed a stray piece of confetti from his hair. Her touch was light, familiar, and grounding. But sometimes, when you have fun, the whole world stops to watch. He leaned his head against her shoulder, a comfortable weight. The roar of the crowd, the flash of cameras, the immense pressure, it all melted away. Here, in this quiet room, he wasn't the apex master, the champion of champions. He was just Ash, and she was Serena. That was enough. "You were amazing," she whispered, resting her head against his. "All of you." He didn't answer. He just closed his eyes, soaking in the quiet peace, the feeling of her beside him. Outside, the world was celebrating his power. But in here, he was celebrating his reason for it. Far away, in his dark chamber, Valerius turned away from the screen, which now showed replays of Ash's victory. His face was a mask of grim resolve. "He is a symbol," Valerius said to his assembled followers. "And symbols are powerful. They inspire hope. They create belief." He picked up the fallen silver cup, his grip so tight his knuckles were white. "Our task, then, is not merely to defeat the man. We must shatter the symbol. We will travel to Hoenn, to the very cradle of Mega Evolution. We will create a wound in the world, a place where his false power cannot reach. We will show the world the truth by force." Ash Ketchum's symphony is over. Now, he will face the silence. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Shadow in Hoenn. The air in Hoenn was different. It lacked the crisp, celebratory energy of Galar, the warm, welcoming embrace of Alola. Here, under the watchful gaze of Mount Chimney, the air was thick with a quiet anxiety. It clung to the humid breeze blowing in from the sea, a tension that even the bustling metropolis of Rustboro City couldn't completely shake. Stephen Stone, the ever-immaculate champion of the Hoenn region, led them through the polished halls of the Devon Corporation headquarters. His silver hair seemed to catch the light in a way that made him look less like a man and more like a living statue carved from rare metals. He moved with a grace that belied the worry etched in the fine lines around his eyes. The first reports came from meteorologists, Stephen explained, his voice a low, concerned murmur that echoed slightly in the minimalist corridor. They were tracking atmospheric energy patterns, standard procedure. But they found holes. Pockets where the natural infinity energy that permeates our region was simply gone. Gone, or suppressed? Serena asked, her eyes sharp with focus. She walked beside Ash, her presence a steady counterpoint to his coiled energy. Where he was a force of nature, she was the strategist who understood its flow, the one who saw the patterns in the storm. Stephen offered a slight, appreciative nod. An excellent question. At first, we believed it was being suppressed or drained. But our instruments show no sign of energy displacement. It's not being moved. It is, for all intents and purposes, nullified. It is an absence, a void. He pushed open a set of heavy, soundproofed doors, revealing a high-tech command center. A massive holographic map of Hoenn dominated the room, its vibrant greens and blues marred by several pulsating, dark red blotches. "We're calling them dead zones," Stephen said, gesturing to the map. "The largest is here, near Meteor Falls. Another has appeared in the forests west of Fortree City, and a small, but growing one, in the waters off the coast of Moss Deep." Ash stepped closer to the hologram, his gaze fixed on the anomaly near Meteor Falls. He could almost feel it, a cold spot in the world that shouldn't exist. "What does it do to the Pokémon?" "It makes them listless, weak," Stephen replied, his expression grim. "Wild Pokémon in the zones show signs of extreme lethargy and confusion. Trainers who have passed through report their Pokémon feeling unwell, and their keystones, they feel cold to the touch. Unresponsive." The implication hung heavy in the air. A place where mega evolution was impossible. "It sounds like a targeted attack," Serena observed quietly. "My thoughts exactly," Stephen agreed. "And given the timing, right after your spectacular display in Winden, it feels less like a coincidence and more like a response." He turned his full attention to Ash. "That's why I called you. No one understands this energy, in all its forms, better than you. I need you to go to the primary zone. I need you to feel it, to tell me what this is." The air inside the dead zone was heavy and wrong. It was like breathing wool. The vibrant sounds of the Hoenn jungle, the chirping of Talo and the rustle of Wurmple in the undergrowth, faded away the deeper they ventured, replaced by an oppressive, unnatural silence. The very color of the world seemed muted, the lush greens of the ferns and the vibrant petals of the flowers looking washed out, as if viewed through a dusty pane of glass. Pikachu, perched on Ash's shoulder, was uncharacteristically still. His ears drooped slightly, and his red cheeks, normally buzzing with latent electricity, were inert. Ash reached up and stroked his partner's back, feeling the lack of the familiar, comforting static. It was like touching a battery that had been completely drained. "I can feel it," Ash said, his voice low. He held up his left wrist. The keystone in his mega glove was cold, a dead piece of rock. There was no inner light, no hum of latent power. "There's nothing to connect to. The energy isn't just gone. The air itself feels hungry. Like it's trying to pull the energy out of us, too." Serena scanned their surroundings, her hand resting on the Pokeball at her belt. Her sharp eyes missed nothing: the unnatural stillness of the leaves, the absence of any tracks on the damp earth. "This place is a perfect ambush point," she whispered. "The terrain is uneven, with plenty of cover. They could hit us from any direction." Her words were prophetic. The attack came without a sound. No battle cry, no rustling leaves. One moment, they were walking through a silent clearing, the next, the world was chaos. Dark, crescent-shaped blades of energy, night slashes, erupted from the shadows, aimed not at Ash or Serena, but at their feet. They leapt back just as the ground where they stood was carved into deep gouges. From the trees and the rocks, figures emerged. They were clad in sleek, dark gray uniforms with silver accents that seemed to absorb the dim light. Their faces were concealed by masks designed to look like the emotionless face of an onyx. They moved with a chilling, synchronized efficiency, their Pokémon already deployed and surrounding the clearing. A hulking Haxorus, a swift Weavile, a stoic Bronzong, and a menacing Bisharp. They formed a perimeter, cutting off all escape. In the center of their formation stood a young woman with a severe black haircut and eyes that burned with the cold fire of absolute conviction. She held no mask. She wanted Ash to see her face. It was Alara, the woman from Valerius's chamber. "Ash Ketchum," she declared, her voice devoid of warmth. "The false idol, you have come, as our master predicted you would. Valerius sent you," Ash stated, his body already shifting into a battle stance. Pikachu leapt from his shoulder, landing on the ground with a soft thud, his ears now perked and his eyes narrowed. "Master Valerius has offered you a chance to see the truth," Alara said. "Here, in this purified space, your gimmicks are meaningless. Your shortcuts to power are gone. Here, you are just a trainer. And we will show the world how utterly hollow that is. You don't know the first thing about me or my Pokémon," Ash shot back, his hand moving to his belt. "Sceptile, I choose you." The forest Pokémon materialized in a flash, its yellow eyes immediately locking onto the opponents, its leaf blades tensed and ready. A native of Hoenn, he seemed less affected by the zone's oppressive atmosphere. "A predictable choice," Alara sneered. "Haxorus, Dragon Pulse, Weavile, Ice Shard, Bronzong, set a trick room. Bisharp, Iron Head, overwhelm them." The command was instant and brutal. A sphere of draconic energy, a volley of ice, and two charging steel-clad Pokémon all hurtled toward Sceptile and Pikachu simultaneously. And behind them, a strange, box-like distortion of reality began to form around the battlefield. Pikachu, Thunderbolt on the Haxorus. Sceptile, Leaf Storm on the Weavile. Ash commanded, his mind racing. He had to stop the trick room. Pikachu, after the Thunderbolt, quick attack on the Bronzong. Pikachu's cheeks sparked, but the resulting Thunderbolt was a shadow of its usual self, a thin, sputtering lance of electricity that Haxorus shrugged off with ease. The zone was dampening his power. Sceptile fared better, unleashing a vortex of razor leaves that forced the Weavile to dodge, but the ice shards still flew true, peppering Sceptile's hide and making him hiss in pain. Meanwhile, Pikachu's quick attack, aimed at disrupting the Bronzong, was too slow. The trick room settled over the battlefield with a nauseating lurch. The world seemed to twist, and suddenly, the slower Pokémon were moving with blinding speed, while the faster ones felt like they were wading through mud. The swift Sceptile was now sluggish, while the hulking Haxorus moved like a blur. A classic pincer movement, Serena analyzed from the edge of the clearing, her mind working furiously. "They're using the trick room to reverse your speed advantage. Sceptile and Pikachu are at a massive disadvantage now." "I see that," Ash grunted, as Sceptile barely managed to dodge a now supersonic Iron Head from the Bisharp. "Pikachu, use agility. Try to fight the trick room's effect." "Futile," Alara called out, her voice dripping with contempt. "Your reliance on natural talent has made you sloppy. We rely on pure, unadulterated strategy. Haxorus, Dragon Claw." The massive dragon was on Sceptile in an instant, its claws glowing. Sceptile, moving as if trapped in amber, couldn't evade. The attack landed, sending him skidding back. Ash grit his teeth. His instincts screamed at him to mega-evolve Sceptile, to tap into that wellspring of power and shatter this suffocating strategy. He instinctively reached for his keystone, but the cold, dead feeling of the rock was a harsh reminder. That path was closed to him. He was on his own. Raw tactics, no shortcuts. He took a breath, closing his eyes for a fraction of a second. The noise of the battle, the oppressive silence of the zone, Alara's taunts, it all faded away. He focused on the bonds. He felt Pikachu's frustration, the sting of his weakened electricity. He felt Sceptile's pride, his anger at being unable to move as he should, the burning cold of the ice on his back. He opened his eyes. The panic was gone, replaced by a sharp, diamond-hard clarity. "Serena," he called out, not taking his eyes off the battle. "What's the duration on a standard trick room?" 5 turns, she answered instantly. "This is turn 2. 3 more turns." They had to survive for 3 more turns. "Okay, new plan," Ash yelled. "Sceptile, forget dodging. Use Detect. Pikachu, get on Sceptile's back." Sceptile's eyes flashed blue. He stood his ground as the Weavile lunged with another ice shard. Just before the attack hit, Sceptile's form shimmered, and the shards passed harmlessly through him. Pikachu, meanwhile, scrambled onto his back, a small yellow rider on a green steed. A defensive maneuver, Alara scoffed. You're only delaying your defeat. Am I? Ash countered, a small smile touching his lips. Sceptile, Leaf Blade, aim for the ground. Pikachu, Iron Tail on the ground, same spot. It was a bizarre command. Sceptile dug his glowing green blades into the earth in front of him while Pikachu, clinging to his back, slammed his glowing steel hard tail into the exact same spot. The ground shuddered and cracked. Pointless destruction, Alara muttered, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. Bisharp, Night Slash, Haxorus, keep up the pressure. Detect. Again, Ash commanded. Once more, Sceptile's form shimmered, and the attacks passed through him. But this was the last time it would work so soon. He was vulnerable now. The third turn of Trick Room was ending. One more to go. What is he doing? One of the masked grunts asked, his voice tight with confusion. Alara's eyes widened as she finally understood. It's not pointless. He's changing the terrain. Stop him. All Pokémon, full assault. Too late, Ash roared. Sceptile, Pikachu, dig, now. Using the fissure they had created, both Pokémon dove into the softened earth, vanishing from sight just as a wave of attacks converged on their position, blasting chunks of rock and soil into the air. Silence descended for a moment. Alara and her grunts stared at the empty patch of ground. Where did they? The answer came from directly beneath them. The ground erupted as Sceptile and Pikachu burst forth. Their subterranean attack wasn't aimed at the Pokémon, but at the trainers. The grunts cried out in shock, stumbling back, their formation breaking. And then, with a final, shuddering pulse, the Trick Room collapsed. Now, Ash bellowed, the command ringing with renewed power. Sceptile was a blur of green motion. Before Haxorus could even register the change in speed, Sceptile was on it, a powerful leaf blade striking its leg and forcing the huge Pokémon to its knees. Pikachu, a yellow thunderbolt once more, shot off Sceptile's back and slammed headfirst into the Bronzong with a volt tackle, the impact echoing like a cannon shot. The bell-like Pokémon was sent flying, crashing into a tree. It was a complete reversal. Without the Trick Room, the Order's Pokémon were suddenly outmaneuvered and outclassed. This isn't possible, Alara gasped, her composure shattering. Without your power-ups, you should be nothing. My power was never in a stone or a wristband. Ash yelled back, his voice raw with passion. It's in them. In our bond. Sceptile, Solar Beam. Pikachu, help him out. Thunderbolt on the beam. Sceptile planted his feet, and a brilliant sphere of light began to gather on his back. It was slow to charge without harsh sunlight. But then Pikachu leapt onto his back again, pouring a stream of electricity into the gathering energy. The sphere grew exponentially, the raw solar power supercharged with volatile electricity. It was a move they had invented on the fly, a testament to their perfect synchronization. Duel. Alara's eyes were wide with disbelief. A combination move, no trainer would risk such an unstable energy fusion. We trust each other, Ash declared. Fire. The resulting beam was a torrent of searing white and gold, a wave of untamable energy that was neither grass nor electric, but something new and overwhelming. It ripped across the clearing, not aimed at any single Pokémon, but at the space between them. The blast threw all four of the Order's Pokémon back, knocking them out in a single, decisive blow. In the ringing silence that followed, Alara stood alone, her Pokémon defeated at her feet. She stared at Ash, not with hatred, but with a profound, soul-shaken confusion. He had been stripped of everything she thought made him strong, and yet, he had shown a level of mastery she couldn't comprehend. Stephen Stone and a squad of rangers arrived minutes later, drawn by the energy signature of the final attack. They took the unresisting Order members into custody, Alara included. As a ranger led her away, she stopped and looked back at Ash. Why? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Why do you cling to these corrupting powers? We are trying to save Pokémon. To protect them from trainers who would see them as nothing but fuel for their own ambition. What are you talking about? Ash asked, taking a step toward her. Her eyes hardened, the fanaticism returning. Have you ever seen a Pokémon burn itself out from the strain of Mega Evolution? I have. My partner, a beautiful, proud Gardevoir. Her trainer pushed her too hard, too fast, chasing a victory he didn't deserve. The power was too much. It consumed her from the inside out. We found her. Her body had crystallized, turned to lifeless stone. Her voice cracked with a grief that was raw and real. These powers you champion are a cancer. They promise strength, but they deliver only pain and loss. We are the cure. She was led away, leaving Ash standing in the silent clearing, her words echoing in his mind. He looked at Pikachu, who nudged his leg reassuringly. He knew his bond was different. He knew he would never push his Pokémon that way. But her story, it struck a nerve. He had seen the dark side of power before, had fought against those who would abuse it. For the first time, he was forced to see the battle gimmicks not just through his own eyes, but through the eyes of those who had been burned by them. As the last of the Order members was escorted out of the clearing, a sudden, intense cold descended. It was far colder than the Weavile's ice shards. It was a deep, penetrating chill that seemed to leach the warmth from their very bones. The already muted colors of the zone faded further, becoming almost grayscale. The oppressive silence deepened, becoming a physical pressure against their eardrums. What is this? Serena breathed, wrapping her arms around herself. Steven stared at the center of the clearing, where the battle had been most intense. A handheld device in his hand began to wail, its screen flashing red. The void, he whispered, his voice tight with alarm. It's expanding. The energy output isn't just zero, it's reading as a negative value. It's actively consuming the ambient energy. Ash felt it too. It was the hungry feeling from before, but 100 times stronger. A palpable emptiness. It was a silent, invisible entity, and for a terrifying moment, he felt a wave of pure, unadulterated despair wash over him, an impulse to simply give up, to lay down and let the nothingness take him. He saw Pikachu shudder, and he scooped his partner into his arms, the small Pokémon's warmth a tiny ember against the encroaching cosmic cold. Then, as quickly as it came, the feeling receded. The cold lessened, the colors seeped back into the world, and the oppressive pressure vanished, leaving only the zone's original, passive emptiness. Steven looked from his device to Ash, his face pale. That was not the order of the adamant orb. That was something else, something they have unknowingly disturbed. Later that night, on a private balcony overlooking the glittering lights of Rustboro, Ash stared up at the star-filled sky. Serena came and stood beside him, placing a comforting hand on his arm. She didn't speak, giving him the space he needed. She really believed it, Ash said finally, his voice quiet. She believed she was the hero. That I was the villain. People can be convinced of anything if they're scared enough, or hurt enough, Serena replied softly. Her pain was real, Ash. That doesn't make what she's doing right, but it makes it understandable. He nodded, leaning into her touch. I know our bond is real. But what if she's right about how other people might use these powers? What if the world isn't ready for them? Maybe it isn't, Serena admitted. But the answer isn't to destroy them. It's to show everyone the right way. The way you do. You don't just win battles, Ash. You inspire people. That's why you're a symbol. Not because of the gimmicks, but because of the heart you show when you use them. Her words were a balm on his troubled thoughts. He knew she was right. But as he looked out at the vast, dark expanse of the night sky, he couldn't shake the memory of that profound, life-draining cold in the forest. The order of the adamant orb was a threat he could understand, a challenge he could meet. But that was something different. An enemy without a face or a voice. A shadow that was slowly, silently, beginning to fall over their world. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Galar's political storm. The air that greeted them on the tarmac at Wyndon Airport was charged. Not with the electric thrill of a championship match, but with the low, anxious hum of a gathering storm. Leon met them personally, a rare departure from protocol that spoke volumes about the gravity of the situation. The Galar champion's usual irrepressible charisma was strained, his famous smile tight at the edges. His cape, normally a symbol of flamboyant confidence, seemed to hang heavily on his shoulders. Ash, Serena, thank you for coming on such short notice, he said, his voice a low, urgent baritone as he ushered them into a waiting executive car. The windows were tinted, affording them privacy from the curious eyes of the press that were already gathering at the terminal gates. The situation is deteriorating faster than we anticipated. The car sped through the streets of Winden, the familiar sights of the city a blur. Inside, a holographic display flickered to life, showing a swirling, blood-red vortex of energy superimposed over a map of the region. It was centered near the city of Hammerlock, its angry tendrils reaching out towards the surrounding towns. "We've got a power spot going critical," Leon explained, his finger tracing the edge of the expanding storm. "It's leaking raw, unstable Dynamax energy. Wild Pokémon in the area are Gigantamaxing spontaneously, without a trainer or a band. They're raging, out of control. We're evacuating the surrounding areas, but the energy field is expanding. Sonia believes if we can't contain it, the feedback loop could trigger a cascade effect across the entire Galar region. We'd be looking at a second darkest day." The name fell into the car's quiet interior with the weight of history. The darkest day was Galar's founding trauma, a tale of a rampaging, world-ending beast held back only by ancient heroes. To invoke it was not hyperbole, it was a statement of existential threat. "What's the League doing?" Ash asked, his gaze fixed on the angry red vortex. He could feel its chaotic energy even from here, a distant, discordant shriek at the edge of his senses. Leon's jaw tightened. "That's the other reason I called you. We have a new problem." The problem had a name: Chairman Cromwell. He was the polar opposite of his predecessor, the visionary and ultimately disgraced Chairman Rose. Where Rose had been a charismatic showman obsessed with the future, Cromwell was a man embalmed by the past. He was a creature of bureaucracy, a small, meticulously dressed man with thinning gray hair and eyes that seemed to assess everything in terms of risk and liability. They met him in a sterile, white boardroom at the top of Rose Tower, a room that had been stripped of its predecessor's opulent eccentricities and replaced with bland, corporate austerity. "Mr. Ketchum," Cromwell began, his voice dry as old paper. He didn't rise to greet them. "Champion Leon has, against my explicit counsel, seen fit to involve you in this delicate matter." "It looks more than delicate, from where I'm standing," Ash countered, his tone respectful but firm. Cromwell steepled his fingers, his expression one of pained patience. "What you are seeing, Mr. Ketchum, is raw data, prone to sensationalist interpretation. What I am managing is a complex situation involving public safety, economic stability, and the international reputation of the Galar League. My experts assure me this is a manageable energy surge. An anomaly, to be sure, but one that requires a calm, methodical approach. Not," he added, with a pointed look at Ash, "the kind of reckless, high-profile interventionism you are known for." "My interventionism has saved a few regions," Ash said, his voice dropping a notch. Pikachu, on the floor by his feet, bristled, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "And we are all very grateful for your past heroics," Cromwell said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "However, they have also left a trail of considerable property damage and political fallout. This is Galar, not Alola. We do things by the book here. You are to stand down and allow my qualified league staff to handle this situation. Your presence here is unauthorized and will only incite public panic." Leon, who had been simmering silently, finally spoke up. "With all due respect, Chairman, your methodical approach isn't working. The field has grown by 12% in the last 6 hours alone. We need to act now." "What we need, Champion, is to maintain order," Cromwell retorted, his voice like chipping ice. "And that is precisely what I am doing." The meeting was over. They were stonewalled, dismissed like children who had wandered into their parents' office. As they walked out into the grand, empty lobby, Ash slammed a fist into his other palm in frustration. "He's not just cautious, he's actively obstructing," Ash fumed. "It's like he doesn't want to solve the problem." "Maybe he can't afford to," Serena said thoughtfully, her eyes distant. She had been quiet during the meeting, but her mind had been racing, piecing together the unspoken parts of the conversation. His reaction, it wasn't just about procedure. It was about control. Control of the narrative. She pulled out her Rotom phone, her fingers flying across the screen. When Rose was disgraced, the league's stock plummeted. There was a massive corporate buyout. Cromwell was installed by the new board of directors, a board composed primarily of executives from Macrocosmos Energy. The pieces clicked into place. Sonia's research lab is near Hammerlock, Ash remembered. She told me Macrocosmos built a massive new power plant just outside the city last year. Serena's screen lit up with a satellite map. There, right on the edge of the swirling red vortex, was a sprawling industrial complex. A power plant that harnesses ambient Dynamax energy from the surrounding power spots, she read from the article on her screen. And one that, according to their latest financial disclosures, is catastrophically underinsured against large-scale energy events. If that plant goes down, Macrocosmos, and Cromwell's backers, are ruined. So he's not protecting the people, Leon growled, his face dark with fury. He's protecting his sponsors. He's willing to risk a second darkest day to avoid a financial scandal. Their dilemma was made infinitely worse by the storm brewing in the media. Cromwell, a master of public relations, held a press conference to reassure the public. He stood at a podium, a picture of calm authority, speaking of minor atmospheric disturbances and precautionary evacuations. As he spoke, the world's information networks were set on fire. A coordinated campaign erupted across social media, news sites, and television broadcasts. It was the Order of the Adamant Orb. They released slickly produced videos showing Ash's exhibition match against Cynthia, but with the colors distorted, the sounds warped to be more menacing. An energy expert, a disgraced professor long since discredited for his radical theories, spoke with grave authority about how Ash's unprecedented fusion of 4 Gimmick energies had created a harmonic dissonance in the world's energy field, a crack in the very fabric of reality. He claimed the Galar surge was not an anomaly, but a direct consequence. An aftershock. The message was insidious and effective. This is Ash Ketchum's fault. The propaganda spread like wildfire. Hashtags like #ban the gimmicks and #Ketchum's curse began to trend. The public, already on edge, now had a target for their fear. Cromwell seized on it immediately, using the manufactured outrage as justification for his inaction. You see, he told Leon in a clipped hollow call. Bringing Ketchum here was a mistake. The people see him as the cause, not the solution. He is a political liability. Trapped in their hotel suite, watching the news reports, Ash felt a cold fury building inside him. They were fighting a war on 2 fronts, one against a gathering storm of energy, and another against a storm of lies. We can't wait for him, Ash said, turning away from the screen. His eyes met Leon's. You're the champion. You have to maintain appearances. But I don't. Leon nodded slowly, a silent understanding passing between them. The rules no longer applied. Sonia's been analyzing the energy patterns, he said, pulling up a secure connection to the young professor. She thinks she's found the epicenter. A cave system beneath the main power spot that isn't on any official maps. Cromwell will have the entire area cordoned off, Serena pointed out. Then I'll have to give his security detail something else to worry about, Leon said, a flicker of his old, defiant spark returning. I think it's time for an unscheduled, champion time training exhibition. On the far side of the region, near Spikemouth, it should draw most of the media and the league's top security away from Hammerlock for a few hours. A distraction, Ash said with a grin. A strategic reallocation of assets, Leon corrected, the corner of his mouth twitching upwards. Go, do what you do best. I'll handle the chairman. The air near the hidden cave was electric. It tasted of ozone and static, and every hair on their arms stood on end. The sky above was a terrifying, beautiful spectacle, a swirling dome of crimson light that pulsed with a slow, sickly heartbeat. The ground trembled with a constant, low-frequency hum. This was the heart of the storm. Guided by Sonia's map on Serena's Rotom phone, they slipped past the minimal security cordon Leon's distraction had afforded them and found the entrance to the cave system, a narrow fissure hidden behind a waterfall of cascading energy. Inside, the hum became a roar. The very rock around them glowed with a faint red light. It was a place of raw, untamed power. At the center of the vast cavern was not a single, giant Pokémon. There was no monster to be fought. There was only a wound. It was a tangled, chaotic mass of pure Dynamax energy, coalesced with something darker, something psychic and filled with pain. It thrashed and writhed like a living thing, lashing out with violent tendrils of energy that gouged deep scars into the cavern walls. It was the source of the instability, a nexus of agony that was poisoning the land. That's not Eternatus, Serena breathed, her hand tightening on Ash's arm. But it feels like a memory of it. An echo. Ash closed his eyes, reaching out with his aura. He felt it instantly. A wave of indescribable loneliness. The terror of imprisonment. The rage of being used. It was the psychic residue of the great beast, a scar left on the world from the darkest day, now reawakened and agitated. The energy void the Order had created in Hoenn hadn't just been a hole, it had been a vacuum. And the ancient, wounded power of Galar was trying to scream itself into that emptiness. He knew, with absolute certainty, that fighting it would be a fatal mistake. To attack it with a max move or AZ move would be like throwing gasoline on a fire. The raw power would only feed the chaos, making it stronger, more violent. "We can't beat it," Ash said, his voice quiet and steady. "We have to calm it down." He took a step forward. Pikachu moved to follow, but Ash held up a hand. "No, you guys stay here with Serena. Protect her. This is something I have to do alone." He walked to the edge of the raging storm of energy, the wind it generated whipping his jacket around him. He didn't reach for a Pokeball. He didn't raise his Dynamax band. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath, centering himself in the heart of the maelstrom. He reached out not with his hands, but with his mind. With his aura. He pushed past the screaming rage and the terror, searching for the core of the pain. And then, he projected. He didn't project power or a command to stop. He projected his own memories, his own feelings, the very essence of his bond with his Pokémon. He sent the memory of playing with a young, shy Froakie by a stream. He sent the feeling of soaring through the Alolan sky on Charizard's back, the sun warm on his face. He sent the quiet pride of watching Lucario master Aura Sphere, the goofy joy of Snorlax waking up just in time to win a battle, the fierce loyalty in Pikachu's eyes as they faced down a legendary Pokémon. He sent moments of peace. Sitting with all his Pokémon at Professor Oak's lab, the quiet contentment of the herd. Sharing a pastry with Serena in a Lumio's city cafe. The feeling of a hard-won badge, the quiet respect of a defeated opponent. He showed the raging, wounded psychic energy a world beyond its pain. He showed it connection. He showed it trust. He showed it love. The psychic feedback was immense. The storm's agony washed over him in waves, threatening to drown his own consciousness. The loneliness was a physical cold that tried to freeze his heart, the fear a shrieking chorus in his mind. He felt the phantom weight of millennia of imprisonment, the searing pain of being a living weapon. It was a battle of wills, fought in a landscape of pure emotion. He staggered, a trickle of blood running from his nose. His knees buckled. "Ash!" Serena cried out, starting forward. A massive form suddenly moved to block her path. It was Ash's Snorlax, who had let himself out of his Pokeball. Beside him, Lucario stood, his eyes glowing with blue light, projecting a defensive wall of aura around Ash. Pikachu was a crackling ball of fury on Snorlax's shoulder, his electrical sacs blazing as he and Greninja intercepted a pack of maddened Boldore that had been drawn into the cavern. They were his guard, his family. They would not let him fall. Their steadfast presence was a lifeline. Ash gritted his teeth, planting his feet, and pushed back against the tide of despair with one final, triumphant memory. The moment in Winden, standing before Cynthia, a symphony of four powers united by a single, unwavering bond of trust. He projected not just his bond with his Pokémon, but his very philosophy. That power was not a tool for domination, but a bridge to understanding. Slowly, painstakingly, the change began. The violent, thrashing tendrils of crimson energy began to soften. The chaotic screaming in his mind quieted to a mournful cry, and then to a low, resonant hum. The blood-red light gentled, shifting to a stable, shimmering magenta. The storm was not vanishing. It was coalescing, stabilizing, finding a new, peaceful equilibrium. The wound was closing. By the time the sun began to cast its first pale rays over the Galar countryside, the vortex in the sky had vanished. The ground was still. The oppressive, anxious energy was gone. In its place, within the cavern, a new power spot pulsed with a calm, steady, and immensely powerful light. The roar of helicopter blades broke the morning silence. Chairman Cromwell and a team of League officials landed near the cave entrance, their faces a mixture of disbelief and astonishment. They stared at the now peaceful landscape, then at Ash, who was slumped against Lucario, exhausted but smiling. Cromwell opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing he could say. The crisis was over. The propaganda was meaningless in the face of this undeniable result. He had been outmaneuvered, his authority rendered irrelevant. Ash pushed himself to his feet, Serena rushing to his side to support him. He looked the chairman directly in the eye, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of the night's ordeal. The world is changing, Mr. Cromwell. It's getting louder and more dangerous. You can either stand in its way, clinging to your rulebooks, or you can help us protect it. Without waiting for a reply, he and Serena turned and walked away, his Pokémon falling into step around them. They met Leon at a rendezvous point on a scenic cliffside. The champion looked from their tired faces to the now clear sky in the direction of Hammerlock, and a slow, relieved smile spread across his face. Together, they watched the sun rise, painting the Galar landscape in hues of gold and pink. The political storm had been weathered, and the physical one had been tamed. But Ash knew this was just a single battle. The Order's influence was growing, their ideology spreading like a poison. And he could still feel the echo of the storm's agony in his mind, that deep, primal fear of an encroaching emptiness. It was a fear that he was beginning to realize might not belong to Eternatus alone. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. Alola's Fading Light. The Alolan sun was a physical blessing. It warmed the skin, eased the tension from muscles, and seemed to bake the very memory of Galar's cold, sterile boardrooms and media storms out of existence. Here, on the lanai of Professor Kukui's beachside home, the only storm was the gentle, rhythmic crash of waves against the white sand. The air smelled of salt, hibiscus, and the sweet aroma of Malasada's burnet was frying in the kitchen. Ash laughed, a deep, genuine sound that had been absent for weeks. He was on the floor, building a wobbly tower of brightly colored blocks with Lei, Kukui and Burnett's young son. The toddler, with a shock of dark hair and his father's infectious grin, shrieked with delight as Ash carefully placed the final block, then immediately knocked the entire structure over with a sweep of his chubby hand. Pikachu, sitting beside them, mimicked the toddler's cry of joy. Serena watched them from a lounge chair, a soft smile on her lips. She was sketching in a notebook, capturing the scene not with the meticulous detail of a photograph, but with the fluid, emotional lines of a feeling. This was the Ash she had first met, the one whose boundless heart could connect with any person or Pokémon. It was a side of him the world, so focused on his power, rarely got to see. "It's good to have you home," Kukui said, leaning against the railing. He'd swapped his usual lab coat for a simple tank top and shorts, looking more like a surfer than a world-renowned Pokémon professor. "The islands missed you, yeah. We missed them, too," Ash replied, ruffling Lei's hair. "It feels easy here. Simple." The peace was so profound, so complete, that its shattering felt like a physical violation. Kukui's Rotom phone buzzed with a frantic, jarring alarm he'd never heard before. He snatched it up, his relaxed demeanor vanishing in an instant. His face went from confusion to disbelief, and then to a grim, cold anger. "Hala is on the line. All channels," he said, his voice suddenly tight. "It's an emergency." He tapped the screen, and a holographic image of the Mele Mele Island Kahuna flickered into existence. Hala's normally jovial face was a mask of grief and fury. He was breathing heavily, and his white robes were smudged with dirt. "Kukui, Ash, there has been an attack." Hala's voice was strained, hoarse with emotion. "The ruins of conflict, it has been desecrated." The words hung in the warm, sunny air, a sudden frost that chilled them all to the bone. The ruins of conflict was Tapu Koko's shrine. It was one of the most sacred places in all of Alola. By the time they arrived, the area was already cordoned off by Alola's small contingent of rangers. But nothing could contain the feeling of the place. It was the dead zone from Hoenn, but 1,000 times worse. It wasn't just an absence of energy, it was a malevolent presence. A suffocating blanket of spiritual silence that pressed down on them, trying to snuff out the light of their own auras. The sight was worse than the feeling. The ancient stone archways were cracked and toppled. The central altar, where generations of trainers had presented Z crystals to be blessed, was shattered into 1,000 pieces. And carved into the remaining stones, into the very earth itself, were strange, jagged runes. They glowed with a sickly, pulsating purple light, a poison that seemed to be actively repelling the natural, vibrant energy of the island. Ash reached into his pocket and pulled out his Z-ring. The crystal, a gift from Tapu Koko itself, was dark. Not just inert, like his keystone had been in Hoenn, but utterly dead, as if the life within it had been violently extinguished. This wasn't a strategic attack on a battle mechanic. This was a murder. Who would do this? Burnett whispered, her hand covering her mouth in horror. Why? Before anyone could answer, Kukui's phone rang again. Then again. It was Olivia from Akala Island, then Nanu from Ulaula, then Hapu from Pony. The reports were all the same. The ruins of life, the ruins of abundance, the ruins of hope. All of them had been hit in a simultaneous, coordinated strike. The spiritual heart of Alola had been ripped out. A low, mournful cry echoed from the sky. It was a sound of pure anguish. They looked up to see the 4 island guardians circling high above their respective islands, flickering in and out of view like unstable phantoms. They were enraged, wounded, their connection to their homes and their people poisoned by the runes. They couldn't get close to their own shrines. Ash felt a surge of cold, righteous fury unlike anything he had ever known. This wasn't Galar's political maneuvering or Hoenn's tactical challenge. This was a violation of his home. An attack on his family. He closed his eyes, ignoring the suffocating spiritual deadness of the place. He pushed past it, reaching out with his aura, searching for any trace, any residue of the people who had done this. He found it, a faint, cold trail, like the slime of a slug on a hot rock. It was disciplined, focused, and utterly without remorse. And it led up, towards the peak of Alola's highest mountain. Mount Lanakila, Ash said, his voice dangerously quiet. He's there, the one in charge. Ash, you can't go alone. Serena protested, grabbing his arm. This is what they want. That's why I have to go, he replied, his eyes opening. They were burning with a cold fire she had never seen before. This isn't about a battle. This is an execution. The peak of Mount Lanakila was a world of ice and wind. The newly constructed Pokémon League building stood as a monument to Alola's future, but today, it felt like a tombstone. Standing at the edge of the highest cliff, looking out over the archipelago he had just wounded, was Valerius. He was dressed not in the uniform of his order, but in a simple, elegant black coat that whipped around him in the fierce wind. He turned as Ash approached, his violet eyes calm and analytical. There was no malice in them, only a profound, unshakable certainty. I knew you would find me, Valerius said, his voice carrying easily over the wind. Your senses are remarkable. Another mutation, I suppose. Another deviation from the norm. You defiled this place, Ash snarled, his hands clenched into fists. Pikachu was on his shoulder, a compressed storm of electrical fury, his body crackling so intensely that the air around him smelled of rain. You hurt the Tapu. You hurt my family. I performed a necessary surgery, Valerius corrected, his tone that of a doctor explaining a painful but life-saving procedure. The Tapu are capricious, emotional beings. They grant power based on whim. Z moves are a prayer to an unstable god. It is a power built on a foundation of faith, not skill. I have simply removed the object of that faith. I am liberating the trainers of Alola, forcing them to rely on their own strength, not the borrowed power of some fickle deity. You call this liberation? Ash gestured angrily toward the islands below. Look at them. You've caused nothing but pain. All cures are painful at first, Valerius said, his gaze unwavering. Pain is a catalyst for growth. I learned that long ago. He looked down at the single, ornate Pokeball on his belt. I was a champion once. Like you, I believed in the absolute bond between trainer and Pokemon. My partner was a Metagross. We were invincible. Our bond was perfect. So I pushed him. I unlocked his Mega Evolution. The power was intoxicating. His voice became distant, haunted. In the final battle of the World Coronation Series, years before you were even a contender, I pushed him too far. He was injured, exhausted, but I demanded more. I forced the evolution one last time. The infinity energy, untempered by his weakened state, consumed him. He defeated his opponent, and then, he simply crumbled. turned to dust and memory right before my eyes. I won the battle, and in doing so, I murdered my best friend. He looked up at Ash, his violet eyes filled not with sadness, but with the chilling clarity of a zealot. I learned that day that these powers are a lie. A beautiful, seductive lie that promises a deeper connection but delivers only a faster path to destruction. Your bond, Ketchum, is the most dangerous lie of all. You master these powers with ease, and you show the world a path that they cannot follow without destroying themselves. You are a false prophet, and I am here to silence your sermon. You're wrong, Ash said, his voice shaking with contained rage. Your bond was weak, your heart was weak, you blame the power, but it was your failure. And you're going to answer for what you did here today. He grabbed a pokeball. Incineroar, let's go. The hulking fire, dark type appeared with a guttural roar, his flame belt blazing to life. His eyes, fixed on Valerius, were filled with the same protective fury as his trainers. Valerius gave a single, curt nod. So be it, Aggron. Demonstrate the power of purity. His own Pokemon materialized. It was a titan of steel and rock, its body a fortress of armored plates. It was scarred, ancient, a veteran of 1,000 battles. It stood with an unshakable stillness, a mountain of pure, physical power. There was no Mega Stone on it. It needed none. Incineroar, Flare Blitz. Incineroar became a comet of fire and fury, charging across the icy battlefield. Iron Defense, Valerius said calmly. Aggron's metallic body glowed with a faint light. Incineroar slammed into it with the force of an explosion. When the flames cleared, Incineroar was thrown back, panting from the recoil, while Aggron stood unmoved, a faint wisp of smoke rising from its armor. It hadn't even a scratch. Your rage makes you predictable, Valerius stated. Heavy slam. The massive steel Pokemon moved with impossible speed for its size, leaping into the air and crashing down on Incineroar like a falling meteor. The ground itself cracked under the impact. Incineroar was crushed into the ice, defeated in a single, brutal blow. Ash recalled his fallen partner, his heart hammering in his chest. Valerius was different from any opponent he had ever faced. He didn't just counter his moves, he dissected them, exposed their flaws, and punished them with ruthless efficiency. Lycanroc, you're up. Accelerock. The wolf Pokemon shot across the field, a streak of russet fur and sharp rock. Metal Burst, Valerius said, his voice flat. Lycanroc's attack hit home, but Aggron simply absorbed the blow. Then its body flashed with a blinding light, and it unleashed the damage it had taken back at Lycanroc, doubled. The wolf Pokemon was thrown against the league wall, knocked out cold. 2 Pokemon, gone in as many moves. Ash felt a flicker of panic. He was being systematically dismantled. Valerius's words echoed in his mind, his strategy a living testament to his ideology. Pure, fundamental battling, honed to a razor's edge. You see, Valerius said, a hint of something that might have been pity in his voice. Without your tricks, your emotional outbursts are just openings. Your power is a crutch, and I have kicked it out from under you. Ash looked at the last Pokeball on his belt that he'd brought with him. He had others, but this one, it was a wildcard. It was from a place beyond Valerius's rigid, traditionalist worldview. It was his own unorthodox answer to an enemy who worshipped the orthodox. I'm not out of tricks yet, Ash said, a new, sharper confidence in his voice. Naganadel, let's go. The Ultra Beast materialized in the air with an otherworldly chittering sound. It was all sleek purple lines, insectoid grace, and alien intelligence. Its single large eye fixed on Aggron, and its stinger-like abdomen pulsed with a strange, venomous energy. Valerius's calm expression finally broke. A flicker of revulsion, of genuine disgust, crossed his face. An Ultra Beast, a creature from another reality. You would even bond with a blight upon the natural world. You truly have no shame. I bond with my friends, Ash shot back. And you're threatening my friend's home. Naganadel, Sludge Bomb. Naganadel zipped through the air, impossibly fast, and fired a volley of toxic purple sludge. Iron Head, pierce through it, Valerius commanded, recovering his composure. Aggron charged, its head glowing, smashing through the toxic bombs, their contents splashing harmlessly against its steel armor. It was aimed directly at the airborne Naganadel. Dragon Pulse, Ash yelled. A beam of draconic energy shot from Naganadal's main stinger, striking Aggron head-on. The steel titan staggered for the first time, the super-effective attack rattling its armored shell. "It's fast," Valerius conceded, his eyes narrowed. "But it cannot break through Aggron's defenses." Aggron, Stone Edge. Pillars of sharp rock erupted from the ground, chasing the airborne Ultra Beast. Naganadel weaved between them with a fluid, alien grace that was mesmerizing to watch. "You're right," Ash called out. "I can't break through its armor. So I won't." He saw the opening he was waiting for. Naganadel was fast, but Aggron was relentless. Valerius's strategy was perfect, but perfection often came with a blind spot. Valerius only saw Pokémon as collections of types and stats, of attack and defense. He didn't see them as individuals. Naganadel, use its shoulders. X Scissor. Naganadel dove. Instead of attacking, it landed lightly on Aggron's massive right shoulder pauldron, its feet finding purchase. Before Aggron could react, Naganadel used the leverage to launch itself over Aggron's head, its two smaller stingers glowing with a green, insectoid energy. As it passed, it wasn't aiming for the thick back armor. It plunged the X-Scissor attack deep into the unarmored joint where Aggron's neck met its torso. Aggron roared, a sound of pure shock and pain. It was a wound it had never conceived of receiving. "Now, Naganadel, Venoshock," Ash commanded. While still latched on, Naganadel plunged its main stinger into the same weak point and discharged a massive torrent of venom and electrical energy directly into Aggron's body. The steel Pokémon's eyes went wide, its body convulsed, and the amplified poison attack did catastrophic damage from the inside out. The mountain of steel and rock swayed for a moment, then crashed to the ground, defeated. Valerius stared, speechless. His perfect defense, his flawless strategy, undone by a move that defied all conventional logic. Ash hadn't overpowered him, he had outthought him, using a bond with a creature Valerius considered an abomination. As the authorities, led by Kukui and the Kahunas, swarmed the peak to take Valerius into custody, the disgraced ideologue looked at Ash, his eyes burning with a cold, clear fire. "You won with a creature that does not belong in this world," he said, his voice low and venomous. "You prove my point. You will twist any rule, embrace any corruption, to achieve your victory." He was cuffed, but he didn't struggle. He seemed to welcome it. "This changes nothing. My order will continue its work. We are only the surgeons. But the true cure is coming. The Great Purifier. A power from before the world had color, before your precious bonds created all this noise and chaos. It is the purity of nothingness, and it is waking up. Soon, you will all be returned to the great silence." As he was led away, a familiar, bone-deep cold washed over the mountaintop. It was stronger than it had been in Hoenn, a palpable wave of cosmic despair that seemed to be drawn to the raw emotion of the battle, to the desecrated shrines below. Ash saw the world flicker for a moment, the vibrant colors of Alola turning to gray ash. He stumbled, catching himself on the icy ground, the ghost of Valerius's final words echoing in his mind. The great silence. He had won. He had avenged the attack on his home. But standing there on the roof of Alola, with his friends rushing to his side, he had never felt less like a victor. He had only managed to wound a single man. The true enemy, the formless, faceless thing that Valerius so fanatically heralded, was still out there, in the dark. And it was getting closer. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Paradox of Paldea. The air in Paldea tasted of sun-baked earth and ancient secrets. It was a wild, untamed region, and nowhere was that wildness more concentrated than in the great crater of Paldea, a place the locals spoke of in hushed, reverent tones. Area 0. It was a name that felt less like a location and more like a warning. Their intel, pieced together from decrypted data slates recovered from Valerius's command center on Mount Lanakila, was terrifyingly specific. The Order of the Adamant Orb was planning its endgame. Operation Genesis Purge. The objective: detonate a resonance device at the heart of Area 0, neutralizing the Terastal phenomenon at its source. They believed the resulting energy cascade would ripple across the globe, a purifying wave that would erase all battle gimmicks from existence. Gita, the formidable top champion of the Paldene League, met them at a research outpost on the crater's edge. Her usual serene, almost unnerving composure was gone, replaced by a grim urgency. "The government has officially sealed the crater," she said, her voice sharp and low as they stood before a barricade of League vehicles and armed guards. "They're treating it as a domestic terrorist threat. They want to send in a strike team, but their approach is too slow, too cautious. They don't understand the timeline we're on." She handed Serena a small, encrypted datapad. "My best researchers have been monitoring the energy fluctuations. The order has something down there, and it's charging. Fast. Whatever they're planning, it's going to happen within the next few hours." "So we can't go in officially," Ash stated, his eyes already fixed on the swirling clouds that obscured the crater's depths. It wasn't a question. Geeta gave him a long, appraising look. "Officially, no trainer is authorized to enter Area Zero. The environmental hazards and the unstable Pokémon within are too great a risk." She paused, a slight, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "But I have no authority over a visiting researcher and her bodyguard who might, say, get lost while surveying the local flora and fauna." She tapped a barely visible service path on the datapad's map. "This maintenance tunnel is outside the official cordon. Good luck, Ketchum, and for Paldia's sake, do not fail." The descent was like entering another world. The bright Paldean sun was swallowed by the crater's perpetual cloud cover, plunging them into a strange, twilight realm. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of unknown blossoms and a low-frequency hum that vibrated in their bones. Crystalline formations jutted from the earth like broken teeth, pulsing with a soft, internal light. The place was beautiful, alien, and deeply hostile. The first attack came as they navigated a narrow, crystal-lined canyon. The ground shuddered, and a creature that looked like a futuristic, metallic version of Donphan burst from the canyon wall, its body spinning like a drill. "Iron treads," Serena yelled, identifying the Paradox Pokémon. "It's faster than it looks." "Pikachu, Thunderbolt," Ash commanded. A bolt of yellow lightning slammed into the creature's metallic hide, but it barely seemed to notice, its single red eye glowing with focused aggression. It charged, carving a deep furrow in the crystalline ground. "This place is supercharged with energy," Ash grunted, as he and Serena leapt out of the way. "It's making them stronger. We can't afford to fight our way down. We have to be smart." "Follow me," Serena shouted, spotting a network of smaller, intersecting caves in the canyon wall. "We can lose it in there." They scrambled into the darkness, the sound of the rampaging iron treads echoing behind them. The caves were a maze, but Serena, with Geeta's map and her own sharp instincts, navigated them with confidence. They emerged into a vast, open cavern further down, the sound of their pursuer finally fading. It was here they found the Order. A team of 5 grunts in their signature gray uniforms was assembling a bizarre device. It looked like a giant tuning fork, forged from the same glowing crystal as the surrounding landscape, and wired to a complex array of power cells and transmitters. At the center of their operation stood a tall man with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, authoritative demeanor. He watched his team work with the detached focus of a master chess player observing the board. "They're here," the man said without turning, his voice calm. "As I predicted." The grunts spun around, their Pokémon, a Scizor, a Glimmora, a Kingambit, already moving to intercept. "You're Cassian," Ash said, recognizing the face from Valerius's files. He was the Order's chief strategist, Valerius's right hand. "And you are the anomaly that has disrupted all my calculations, Ash Ketchum," Cassian replied, a hint of academic curiosity in his voice. "I must admit, I'm eager to see if your performance can be replicated when you are not the main event." The battle was immediate and brutal. Cassian was a master of synergy, his team's Pokémon moving in perfect, overlapping patterns. Kingambit's supreme overlord ability, boosted by his fallen comrades, made him a terrifying powerhouse, while Glimmora's toxic debris laid a trap of poison spikes with every hit they took. Ash and Serena fought back to back, a seamless fusion of power and strategy. Ash's Infernape, a whirlwind of fists and fire, battled the Kingambit, while Serena's Delphox used her psychic powers to intercept the Glimmora's sludge waves and protect Pikachu from the Scizor's bullet punches. It was a stalemate, a perfectly balanced equation of skill and power. And then, the world shook. A deep, groaning tremor rolled up from the crater's depths, far more powerful than the rampaging Paradox Pokémon. The crystalline structures around them chimed like 1,000 discordant bells, and the very air seemed to warp. A massive fissure cracked open in the cavern ceiling. Rocks and crystal shards began to rain down. "Fall back. Secure the device," Cassian ordered his grunts. One of the larger crystals dislodged and plummeted towards Serena. "Look out," Ash yelled, tackling her and rolling them both behind a rock formation just as the crystal shattered where they had been standing. When the dust settled, a massive wall of fallen rock had sealed the main passage. Ash, Serena, and Cassian were on one side, trapped. The rest of the order was on the other. A tense silence fell, broken only by the low hum of the partially assembled device. Cassian looked at the rockfall, then at Ash and Serena. The cold, calculating look in his eyes was replaced by something else. A flicker of frustration, of grim resignation. He reached into his coat and pulled out a datapad, tossing it onto the ground between them. It slid to a halt near Ash's feet. A complex schematic was displayed on the screen, pulsing with streams of simulated energy. "That is the true design of the Genesis wave," Cassian said, his voice flat. The 1 our scientists presented to Valerius was a sanitized version. They promised a clean, surgical neutralization of Terastal energy. "And what does this one do?" Serena asked, her eyes narrowed, not trusting him for a second. "I ran the full simulation myself, without the ideological filters Valerius insisted upon," Cassian explained. He pointed to a catastrophic failure point in the simulation, a violent explosion of red that consumed the entire model. "The resonance cascade won't just nullify the energy. It will cause it to violently and uncontrollably detonate. The Terastal phenomenon isn't just some free-floating power source. Our deep core scans have confirmed it. It is intrinsically linked to the tectonic plates of the planet. It is the very energy that binds this world together. The Genesis wave won't purify the world. It will shatter it like an egg." Ash stared at him. "Then why are you doing it? You're going to destroy everything you claim to be protecting." A flicker of genuine anger crossed Cassian's face. "I'm not. I believed in the mission. I believed in preserving the purity of the bond, in eliminating the crutches that make trainers weak. I designed a plan to contain this device, to use a fraction of its power to achieve our goals without this apocalypse. But Valerius has become a martyr. His capture has radicalized the inner circle. They are no longer surgeons. They are fanatics who believe the world must be burned to the ground to be saved. They've locked me out of the system. The device is on an automated timer, set to activate in less than 1 hour. And they will not stop it." His confession hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. He was a zealot who had been horrified to discover his god was insane. "So you're just giving up?" Serena challenged, her voice laced with contempt. "Giving up?" Cassian looked at her, his eyes hard. "I am a strategist, mademoiselle. When your fortress is about to be overrun, you do not surrender. You find a new, albeit distasteful, ally. The detonation point is at the very bottom of the crater. The only way to stop the sequence is with a manual override at the primary console. My biometrics are still coded into the system. I can stop it, but I cannot get there alone." The unspoken offer was clear. A truce. A temporary, desperate alliance born of mutual annihilation. "How do we know we can trust you?" Ash asked, his hand still resting on a pokeball. "You don't," Cassian replied simply. "But the alternative is planetary extinction. I am willing to risk your betrayal. The question is, are you willing to risk mine?" The journey deeper was a descent into madness. The fragile truce between the three of them was tested at every turn. They navigated treacherous crystal bridges that shattered behind them, and fought off swarms of screeching roaring moon that descended from the cavern ceilings, their eyes glowing with a primal rage. The Paradox Pokémon weren't just aggressive, they were terrified. They were fleeing, moving upwards, away from something at the crater's core. Cassian fought with a cold, brutal efficiency, his Pokémon, a powerful Corviknight and a swift Dragapult, moving with the precision of surgical instruments. He and Ash battled back to back, their styles a complete contradiction. Ash was all instinct and fluid adaptation, calling out moves that seemed bizarre but worked in perfect harmony with his Pokémon. Cassian was all logic and prediction, exploiting type weaknesses and environmental hazards with a ruthless clarity. Serena was the bridge between them. "Ash, use Pikachu's electricity to light up that crystal cluster. It will blind them on their approach. She'd yell. Then, Cassian, if your Corviknight uses Tailwind now, Delphox can spread her mystical fire over a wider area and cut off their escape. She translated Ash's intuition into strategy, and tempered Cassian's logic with creative tactics. Slowly, grudgingly, a rhythm began to form between the three of them. They finally reached the bottom, the lowest level of Area 0. It was a cavern of impossible scale, so vast its ceiling was lost in the gloom. The air was still and cold, and in the center, they saw it. The source of the Terastal phenomenon. It was a colossal, perfectly formed crystal, the size of a mountain, that pulsed with a soft, multicolored light. It was breathtakingly beautiful, and it seemed to hum with a slow, powerful rhythm, like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. This wasn't a rock, it was alive, it was the heart of the world, and every crystal in Paldea was a vein or an artery connected to it. On a rocky plateau overlooking the crystal heart, the fully assembled Genesis wave device stood, its twin prongs aimed directly at the crystal's core. A countdown timer on its base glowed with ominous red numerals, 847. But there was something else. Something horrifying. At the very base of the living crystal, where it met the cavern floor, was a wound. It wasn't a crack or a fissure. It was a patch of utter, absolute nothingness. A circular void of perfect black that seemed to drink the light from the cavern, to consume the very concept of space around it. The crystalline ground at its edges was decaying, crumbling into gray, lifeless dust. The silence emanating from it was so profound it felt like a physical pressure, a denial of all sound, all life. It was the null, the great silence, no longer a feeling or a cold spot, but a physical, growing cancer on the heart of the world. Cassian stared at it, his face ashen. His datapad beeped, displaying a horrifying new set of readings. "My God," he whispered, his strategic calm completely shattered. It's a dimensional tear. A point where our reality has worn thin." He looked from the wound to the device, and a final, terrible understanding dawned on his face. "They don't know," he breathed, his voice filled with a terror that went beyond his own life or ideology. "The fanatics, they think this is just an energy anomaly. They think the Genesis wave will cauterize it, use the planet's own life force to purify the wound and seal it shut. But it won't, will it?" Serena said, her voice barely a whisper, as she watched a small, floating crystal drift too close to the void and simply cease to exist. "No," Cassian said, his eyes wide with horror as he looked at Ash. "This device doesn't just use the crystal's energy. It uses it as a focusing lens. It's not a key to close the lock. It's a battering ram aimed at a crack in the door. If this device fires, it will use the lifeblood of the entire planet to rip that hole wide open. It won't just purify our world of gimmicks, it will open the floodgates for the great silence to purify our world of everything." On the device's screen, the timer clicked down. 5 o'clock. Chapter 5 end. Chapter 6. Infiltration and Betrayal. 5 minutes. The concept of time had become a physical weight, pressing down on them in the cold, silent depths of the world. Each tick of the countdown on the Genesis Wave's console was a hammer blow against the fragile shell of their reality. The null's wound pulsed softly, a patch of anti-existence that seemed to watch them with a hungry, silent intelligence. "There's no way to the console," Serena stated, her voice tight but level. She was scanning the rockfall that separated them from the main cavern where Cassian's former team was. "It's a solid wall of crystal and rock. We'd need a dozen onyx to clear it in time. They are no doubt attempting to reach us as well," Cassian said, his strategic mind reasserting itself over the initial shock. His eyes darted around the cavern, assessing angles, looking for options where there were none. "They will fail. That rockfall was catastrophic. They are as trapped as we are. So we just stand here and watch the world end?" Ash challenged, his gaze locked on the timer. 3:21. He refused to accept it. There was always a way. Cassian's eyes narrowed. "No, I told you, I am a strategist. And a strategist always has a contingency." He strode over to a seemingly blank section of the cavern wall, running his hand over its smooth, crystalline surface. "The Order did not carry this device down here on their backs. We utilized a series of abandoned Devon Corporation Deep Earth Survey lifts. High-speed, electromagnetic transports. Most were deactivated, but I reactivated and secured one for our own private use." He pressed a specific crystal formation, and a section of the wall slid away with a near-silent hiss, revealing a dark, vertical tunnel and a small, metallic platform. It will take us directly to a surface exit, several kilometers from the main crater entrance. Will it be fast enough? Serena asked. It will have to be, Cassian replied grimly. 1 o'clock. They stepped onto the platform. There was no time for hesitation, no room for the profound distrust that still lingered between them. The enemy was the clock. Hold on, Cassian warned. He tapped a control panel, and the world became a vertical blur. The lift shot upwards with breathtaking, gut-wrenching velocity. The different strata of Area Zero flew past the opening, the twilight caverns, the lush, prehistoric jungles, the arid, rocky canyons, each a fleeting snapshot of a world they were trying to save. Ash braced himself against the wall, Pikachu clinging to his shoulder. He watched Cassian, who stood perfectly still, his face a mask of stone, illuminated by the flashing lights of their ascent. This man had been ready to help end the world an hour ago. Now, he was their only hope. The sheer magnitude of that paradox was not lost on him. The timer on the Genesis wave, now out of sight but burned into their minds, clicked past its final 10 seconds. 003, 002, 001. A deep, resonant hum vibrated up the elevator shaft, so powerful it shook the platform. It was not the sound of an explosion, but of something immense powering on. A deep, planet-sized intake of breath. The lift shuddered to a halt, the doors hissing open to the cool Paldine night air. They had surfaced. All around them, the wild, open plains of the region stretched out under a blanket of stars. But the beauty was marred by a terrifying new phenomenon. The ground itself was glowing. Faint, geometric lines of light, like a vast, subterranean circuit board, were pulsing across the landscape, all converging on the distant great crater. The terrestrial energy of the world was being drawn, siphoned towards the Genesis wave. Cassian's datapad chirped. He looked at the screen, his face pale in its glow. The primary countdown is finished. The device is armed and has entered its final charging sequence. It has begun to draw ambient terrestrial energy from the planetary grid to power its core. So we failed, Serena breathed, the words tasting like ash. No, Cassian said, his voice sharp. This was expected. The local countdown was merely to lock out any interference at the console. It cannot be stopped from down there anymore. The final activation signal must be sent remotely. From the command center, he looked up at the night sky. From the Adamant. An airship, Ash recalled from the files. Where is it? It will be directly overhead, Cassian said, a grim certainty in his tone. Its cloaking systems are state-of-the-art, but for a broadcast of this magnitude, it must remain in direct line of sight with the crater. And it will be receiving a constant stream of telemetry from the charging device. He manipulated his datapad, his fingers flying across the screen. A moment later, a targeting reticle appeared on the display, pinpointing an empty spot in the sky directly above them. There, broadcasting a high-energy signal on a secure frequency. Right where it's supposed to be. He looked at Ash. I assume you have a Pokémon that can get us up there. Ash didn't waste words. Charizard, I choose you. The great fire dragon emerged with a deafening roar, his presence a blast of defiant warmth against the cold, glowing plains. He looked from Ash to the sky, already sensing the urgency. One problem, Serena said, pointing her own Rotom phone at the sky. Thermal imaging is picking up a squadron of Corviknight circling that position. The Order's air patrol, they'll see Charizard coming a kilometer away. They will be looking for a direct, aggressive assault, Cassian countered, his mind already 3 steps ahead. They will not be looking for a silent, high-altitude insertion. He turned to his own Pokeball. Corviknight, to the skies. Use your mirror armor to reflect the starlight. Create a diversion to the south. Draw their attention. Cassian's own Corviknight took to the air, its polished black armor glinting. It banked hard, catching the starlight in just the right way to create a series of brilliant, disorienting flashes far to the south. Immediately, the patrol broke formation, swooping off to investigate the strange phenomenon. That's our window, Cassian stated. We need to move, now. The flight was a tense, vertical climb into the cold, thin air. Charizard beat his powerful wings, carrying the three of them on his back, ascending into the darkness. The world fell away below, a beautiful, dying map of glowing lines. As they reached the coordinates, the air itself seemed to shimmer. They passed through a barely perceptible energy field, and suddenly, it was there. The adamant was a monster. A flying fortress forged from dark, non-reflective metal, shaped like a colossal, aerodynamic arrowhead. It was easily the size of the Winden Stadium, its hull bristling with communication arrays and weapon emplacements. It moved with a silent, menacing grace, a blade hanging over the throat of the world. "The main service hatch is on the ventral side," Cassian whispered over the rush of the wind. "It's shielded, but a plasma charge should override the magnetic lock." "I've got it," Ash said. "Charizard, flamethrower, keep it tight and controlled. Just the locking mechanism." Charizard dove, banking beneath the colossal ship. He unleashed a tight, white-hot beam of plasma that struck the reinforced hatch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shower of sparks, the magnetic lock overloaded. The heavy metal door slid open with a groan of protest. They were in. They dropped into a dark, cavernous cargo bay filled with crates of supplies and spare parts. Charizard returned to his Pokeball, and the three of them were plunged into a tense, armed silence, broken only by the low hum of the airship's engines. "The bridge is at the bow of the ship, 5 decks up," Cassian whispered, producing a schematic of the ship on his datapad. "But we won't get there through the main corridors. They'll be heavily patrolled." He highlighted a series of maintenance shafts and service conduits. "This is our path. It will be tight, but it should be clear." As they moved through the cramped, dimly lit shafts, the ship around them felt nervous. They could hear the clipped, anxious chatter of grunts in the main corridors, their voices echoing through the vents. "Did you see the ground?" One voice said. "It's glowing like the crater." "Command says it's a sign of the purification," another replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "A sign that the Genesis wave is working." "Then why have we lost contact with the excavation team?" The first voice shot back. "And why has the commander sealed the bridge?" Cassian paused, listening. A frown creased his forehead. "The commander. That will be Kalia, Valerius's most fervent disciple. She was always more of a zealot than a soldier. If she's in charge, she'll have the bridge on total lockdown. She won't listen to reason." They reached a junction in the vents that overlooked a small, secondary mess hall. A handful of lower-level technicians were gathered, their faces pale, watching a news feed on a large screen. It showed seismologists from around the globe giving frantic, panicked reports of unprecedented tectonic instability. One of the technicians, a young man no older than Ash, looked away from the screen, his face green. This wasn't the mission," he stammered to his companion. "The mission was to stop the gimmicks, to restore honor. Not this." Cassian saw his opening. "Stay here," he whispered to Ash and Serena. He dropped silently from the vent into the room below. The technicians leapt to their feet, reaching for their sidearms, their faces a mixture of fear and shock. "Commander Cassian," one gasped. "But, you were declared a traitor. Captured in Area Zero." "I was," Cassian said, his voice calm and commanding, slipping back into the role of their superior officer with ease. "Because I discovered the truth. A truth Commander Kalia is hiding from you." He gestured to the news feed. "Look at that. Does that look like a purification to you? Or does it look like the death throes of a planet? The Genesis wave is flawed. I have the original data. It is not a scalpel, it is a sledgehammer. And in 37 minutes, Kalia is going to use it to bring the sky down on all of us." He spoke with an authority that was absolute, presenting them not with an emotional appeal, but with a cold, logical reality. He was not asking for their help. He was informing them of their impending deaths. The young technician who had spoken earlier looked at his comrades, his eyes wide with dawning horror. "He's right," he whispered. "This is wrong." Before the conversation could continue, an alarm blared through the ship. Red lights began to flash, sweeping the room in a bloody, rhythmic pulse. A synthesized voice echoed from the speakers, "Intruder alert. Deck 3, Section Gamma. All units converge." Someone had spotted them. "She knows we're here," Cassian swore, his brief hope of a quiet insurrection vanishing. "We have to move, now." They burst from the room, their stealth mission now a frantic race. Grunts flooded the corridor, and the battle began. It was close quarters and brutal. Pikachu became a yellow blur, weaving through legs and firing off precise thunder shocks to disable opponents without causing lethal harm. Serena's Delphox created dazzling walls of psychic fire, blocking corridors and giving them precious seconds to advance. Cassian's Dragapult was a phantom, firing dragon darts from the ceiling, its speed too great to track. They were an unstoppable force, the fusion of three distinct battle philosophies creating a perfect, chaotic harmony. They fought their way through engineering, past the humming power core of the airship, and up a final service ladder that led to the corridor just outside the bridge. The door was sealed, a thick slab of reinforced steel. Standing before it was Commander Kalia. She was a tall, severe woman with hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to pull at the corners of her eyes. Those eyes, a pale, icy blue, burned with the fire of unwavering faith. Flanking her were two of the Order's elite, clad in heavier armor, their faces grim. Her personal Pokémon, a massive, gleaming Metagross, floated beside her, its four psychic brains already focused on them with palpable menace. The traitor and his corrupting anomalies, Kalia said, her voice dripping with contempt. To think you would side with the very disease we are trying to cure, Cassian. Valerius had faith in you. And you spat on it. Valerius is a fool who was blinded by his own grief. Cassian retorted, stepping forward. And you, Kalia, are a fanatic who is about to commit suicide and take the entire world with you. Look at the data. The Genesis wave will destroy us all. It will cleanse us, she shrieked, her composure cracking. It will burn away the weakness, the shortcuts, the sacrilege of trainers like him. She pointed a shaking finger at Ash. The Great Silence is not an enemy. It is the ultimate purity. A return to the perfect order of nothingness. And you are too cowardly, too attached to this noisy, flawed world to see the beauty of it. There was no reasoning with her. She had seen the truth and embraced it as a holy text. Ash, Serena, deal with her elite guard, Cassian commanded, his face set in grim lines. Kalia and that Metagross, they are mine. The final battle began. The corridor became a whirlwind of energy and motion. Ash's Infernape engaged a powerful Tyranitar, their battle a clash of titans that buckled the very walls. Serena and her Sylveon faced a cunningly fast Cinderace, their fight a dance of grace and misdirection. But the core of the conflict was between the two commanders. It was a battle of ideals fought with steel and psychic power. Cassian's Corviknight, a creature of strategy and precision, swooped and dove, its steel wing attacks glancing off the Metagross's thick armor. Kalia's Metagross was a fortress of raw power, unleashing devastating psychic fangs and meteor mashes that forced the steel bird to remain constantly on the defensive. You always were too cautious, Cassian. Kalia taunted, as her Metagross landed a heavy blow that sent Corviknight careening into a bulkhead. All intellect and no conviction. You could never commit to the final, necessary sacrifice. There is no honor in oblivion, Kalia. Cassian roared back. Inside the bridge, visible through the reinforced viewport in the door, the final countdown was displayed on the main screen, 5 o'clock. Ash saw it. He had to end his fight. Infernape, now, Flare Blitz. Infernape, ignoring its own injuries, wreathed itself in a suicidal inferno and charged, smashing into the Tyranitar with a final, desperate explosion of power. Both colossal Pokémon fell, knocked out. Cassian, we have to get through that door. Ash yelled. But Cassian was pinned down. Metagross had Corviknight trapped, its heavy claws holding the bird Pokémon against the floor. It is over, Kalia declared, a triumphant, ecstatic smile on her face. Witness the dawn of the Great Silence. She turned to a console next to the door, preparing to input the final authorization. At that moment, the young technician from the mess hall, followed by a half-dozen other mutineers, rounded the corner. They opened fire with their stun rifles, not at Ash's team, but at Kalia's elite guards. The betrayal threw Kalia's perfect formation into chaos. Traitors, all of you, she screamed, her face contorted with rage. That was the opening they needed. Pikachu, Ash yelled, pointing at the door's electronic lock. Give it everything you've got. Volt Tackle. Pikachu shot forward like a bolt of living lightning, slamming into the control panel. The door sparked, shuddered, and with a final groan, slid halfway open before shorting out. It was enough. Ash and Serena dove through the opening. The bridge was stark, minimalist, dominated by the massive screen showing the countdown, 0:45. The console is locked with a biometric failsafe. Serena shouted, examining the activation panel. It needs Kalia's voice and palm print. We can't stop it from here. Ash realized. Outside, the battle still raged. He looked from the console to the chaos in the corridor, where Cassian was still struggling against the monstrous Metagross. He saw the path, not to victory, but to survival. He pressed his hand to the comms panel. Cassian, I have an idea. Get ready to move. He then turned to Serena. Can you rig the ship's engines to overload? Serena's eyes widened, then narrowed in understanding. I can, but it'll tear the adamant apart. That's the plan, Ash said grimly. 0:20. Outside, Cassian heard Ash's voice through his earpiece. He looked at his trapped Corviknight, then at the fanatical Kalia. The final betrayal, the point of no return. Corviknight, I release you, he whispered. In a flash of red light, his partner returned to its Pokeball, safe. He was now defenseless. He then looked Kalia in the eye. For the good of the world, Kalia. Not the order. He activated the emergency release on his belt, dropping his remaining Pokeballs to the floor, and charged, unarmed, directly at Kalia and her Metagross. It was a suicidal, insane move. And it was exactly the distraction Ash was counting on. While Kalia and her Pokémon were focused on the charging man, Ash and Pikachu slipped back out of the bridge. Now, Ash yelled to Serena. On the bridge, Serena slammed her hand down on a large, red emergency button. Engine overload initiated, she yelled into the comms. The entire airship screamed. The engine sputtered, roared, and a violent shudder ran through the hull. Alarms blared, drowning out all other sound. The ship began to lurch, its anti-gravity stabilizers failing. Kalia, her eyes wide with shock at the ship's self-destruction, was thrown off balance. In that moment of chaos, Ash's Pikachu, now on Cassian's shoulder, used Iron Tail to shatter the arm of the Metagross holding Cassian's arm. Simultaneously, Ash grabbed Cassian, pulling him back as the Metagross stumbled. To the cargo bay, Ash roared over the noise. Everyone out. The mutinous technicians, Ash, Serena, and a reluctant, stunned Cassian fled through the disintegrating ship, explosions ripping through the corridors behind them. They reached the cargo bay just as a massive secondary explosion tore the bridge from the rest of the ship. Kalia and her fanaticism were consumed by the fire. They leapt from the open bay door, taking flight on Charizard and the Mutineers' own flying Pokémon just as the adamant tore itself apart in a brilliant, silent fireball high in the night sky. They landed on a grassy hilltop, watching the last of the debris burn out in the atmosphere. The world was, for the moment, safe. The countdown was gone. The activation signal had never been sent. But as they looked out at the horizon, they saw that the faint, geometric lines of light across the Paldine Plains had not faded. The Genesis wave, though inactive, was still a loaded gun. And deep at the bottom of the world, the wound, the great silence, was still there. Waiting. Cassian stood apart from the others, watching the wreckage of his former life fall from the sky. He had betrayed his oath, his commander, and his entire belief system to save a world he had been trying to dismantle. Ash walked over and stood beside him. You did the right thing, Ash said quietly. Did I? Cassian replied, his voice hollow. I helped create this monster. I helped build the weapon. All I did today was stop my own hand from pulling the trigger. He finally looked at Ash, his eyes filled with a weary, broken clarity. This is not over. The fanatics are gone, but the null remains. And it is aware of us now. It felt the device power on. It felt us at the edge of its prison. You have not won a war, Ketchum. You have merely survived the first battle. And you have made an enemy of a god. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Null's Awakening. The fire from the Adamant's demise was a fleeting star, a brief, violent orange flower that bloomed and died in the upper atmosphere. In its wake, the silence that fell upon the hilltop was heavier than before, filled with the weight of a battle won and a war just beginning. Below them, Paldea remained a circuit board of soft, pulsing light, a network of ley lines all pointing to the supercharged weapon waiting in the planet's heart. The victory was a breath held, not a breath released. Charizard's warmth was a comforting, solid presence at their backs. The Mutineers, huddled together, looked lost, their purpose and their world shattered in the same fiery explosion. Cassian stood alone, a statue carved from regret, his face illuminated by the cold, analytical glow of his datapad. The energy draw has stabilized, he announced to no one in particular, his voice hollow. The device is no longer actively charging. It is dormant, a fully primed warhead with its trigger disabled. So, what happens now? The young technician, the one who had first sided with them, asked. His name was Reese. He looked at Ash, his eyes searching for an answer, for a leader to follow now that his old ones had literally gone up in smoke. Before Ash could reply, the roar of engines filled the air. A squadron of official League vehicles, led by a sleek, black car, crested the hill. Geeta emerged, her face a mask of stern control, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of profound relief when she saw them. She took in the scene, the ragged group, the still glowing plains, the empty sky, and understood. "You stopped it," she said, the words a statement of fact, not a question. "The signal, yes," Serena confirmed, stepping forward. "But the device is still active. And there's something else down there. Something the device was meant to interact with." Cassian strode over, holding out his datapad to the Paldine champion. "Your researchers were right to be concerned, top champion. The Genesis wave was never meant to be a scalpel." As Geeta and her scientists began to rapidly analyze Cassian's terrifying data, a global communication network flickered to life. One by one, holographic screens materialized in the air around them. Stephen Stone in Hoenn, his face grim. Cynthia in Sinnoh, looking more like a concerned scholar than a warrior. Leon, his usual bravado replaced by a tense watchfulness. They had all been monitoring the situation, waiting for news. "The seismic activity has ceased," Stephen reported, relief evident in his voice. "The energy drain seems to have stopped." "What's the situation on the ground, Ash?" "The activation signal was stopped," Ash began, but he was cut off by one of Geeta's scientists, his voice sharp with panic. "Top champion, the readings from Area Zero. They're going insane." All eyes snapped to the main holographic display, which now showed a seismic map of the Great Crater. At its center, a point of energy that had been registering as a negative value, the null's wound, began to pulse. It was a rhythm of utter blackness, a beat of anti-energy. "What is happening?" Leon demanded. "Did we not stop the device?" "We did," Cassian said, his eyes wide with a horrifying new understanding. "We stopped the signal, but we left a 5-course meal sitting on the doorstep of a starving beast." He pointed a trembling finger at the glowing lines across Paldea. "All of this, a planet's worth of terrestrial energy, focused, concentrated, refined by the Genesis wave. It's the most potent source of life force on the planet. We've created a beacon." On the screen, the black pulse intensified. And then, it stopped. For a single, terrifying moment, all the instruments flatlined. A profound, absolute silence fell over every comm channel, every sensor feed. And then, the wave came. It wasn't an explosion, it was an exhalation, a silent, invisible wave of pure entropy that washed out from the Great Crater. The first indication came from the land itself. The glowing lines of terrestrial energy across Paldea flickered once, then extinguished, like a billion candles snuffed out in a single breath. Ash felt it in his pocket. His Terra orb, which had pulsed with a faint warmth, went utterly cold, its inner light dying, leaving it nothing more than a sphere of inert, cloudy glass. The wave expanded, moving at impossible speed. The holographic feed from Leon in Galar was the first to show the true effect. He was in a small stadium, observing a training match. A massive colossal was in its Gigantamax form. As the invisible wave washed over the stadium, the giant Pokémon didn't shrink in a flash of red light. It simply collapsed, its form deflated like a punctured balloon, shrinking with an unnatural speed until it was just a regular colossal, which fell to the turf with a crash, confused and suddenly exhausted. The Dynamax band on the trainer's wrist sparked and went dark. Next was the feed from Diantha, in the Kalos region. She was observing a young trainer battling a rival. The boy thrust his fist forward, his keystone flaring as he yelled for his Charizard to Mega Evolve. For a moment, the tendrils of light reached out, but as the wave hit, they shattered like brittle glass. The Mega Stone on the Charizard's neck cracked with an audible pop, a fine gray dust sifting from its fractured surface. The keystone on the boy's wrist became a dull, ordinary rock. In Alola, Kukui's feed showed a group of students practicing their poses. As they struck the final pose, their Z rings, which should have erupted with power, simply fizzled. The Z crystals within them turned a milky, opaque white, their inner light gone forever. The gimmicks were dead, not suppressed, not temporarily disabled, erased. But it was so much worse than that. The wave continued to expand. A live news feed from a coastal town in eastern Paldea showed the wave's true horror. As it rolled through the city, the vibrant colors of the buildings, the sky, the sea, all began to desaturate. The world turned to grayscale, as if a cosmic filter had been laid over reality. The bustling sounds of the city, the traffic, the chatter, the music, faded into an oppressive, heavy silence. People walking on the streets stopped mid-stride. The expressions of joy, anger, or worry on their faces went blank, replaced by a placid, unnerving emptiness. They didn't fall. They just stopped. Pokémon standing beside their trainers slumped to the ground, their eyes vacant, the inner light that defined them as living creatures simply gone. They were still breathing, their hearts were still beating, but their spirit, their energy, had been scooped out, leaving behind an empty shell. It's not just nullifying the energy, Serena whispered, her hand gripping Ash's arm, her face pale with horror. It's erasing it. The color, the sound, the life. The great silence, Cassian breathed, the words no longer a fanatical prophecy, but a clinical, terrifying observation. The order of the adamant orb was rendered utterly irrelevant in a single, silent instant. A feed from a safe house in Johto showed a group of grunts watching the global chaos unfold. Their faces were not triumphant. They were masks of pure, undiluted terror. Their cure was a global lobotomy. Their purification was the peace of the grave. They had sought to silence a symphony and had instead summoned a silence that would consume the orchestra, the audience, and the entire concert hall. The wave of silence washed over the hilltop where Ash and the others stood. It was a physical sensation, a pressure that squeezed the air from their lungs and the warmth from their bodies. The world went gray. The chirping of the night insects ceased. The hum of the League's equipment died. Ash felt it try to invade him, a cold, insidious tendril of despair that sought to unspool the very essence of his being. It whispered of failure, of futility. It promised an end to struggle, an effortless peace in utter emptiness. He saw Pikachu falter, the vibrant energy that defined his partner dimming for a terrifying moment. No, Ash snarled, the word a raw, guttural act of defiance. He flared his own aura, not as an attack, but as a shield, a declaration of existence. He wrapped the feeling of it around Serena, around Pikachu, Lucario, and his other Pokémon, a bulwark of pure, unadulterated willpower against the encroaching void. I am here. We are here. The silence pressed against his shield, immense and ancient. But it did not break it. He was an island of fierce, vibrant color in a grayscale world. His bond, his spirit, was something the null could not immediately erase. For a harrowing 10 seconds, they stood in the heart of the wave, a tiny spark of defiance against a cosmic tide. Then, as quickly as it had come, the wave passed. Color and sound rushed back into the world with a disorienting suddenness. The equipment hummed back to life. The holographic screens flickered, showing scenes of global chaos. The world was not the same. A vast, circular portion of the globe, centered on Paldea, was now a silent zone. Millions of people and Pokémon were now husks, trapped in the gray stillness. And on the main map, the wound in Area 0 was visibly larger. It had fed on the life it had consumed, and it had grown. A desperate, global conference of champions and professors convened right there on the hilltop. The faces on the screens were grim, some on the verge of panic. What was that? Diantha asked, her voice shaking slightly. What is this thing? It is a fundamental force of cosmic entropy, Cassian explained, his voice the only calm one among them as he read the data pouring in. Our universe is built on energy, on connection, on the chaotic, beautiful noise of life. The null is the opposite. It is the universe's error correction function. It views the energy of bonds, the very thing that powers mega evolution, Z moves, all of it, as a flaw in the system. A bug to be patched. It doesn't attack, it deletes. So how do we fight it? Leon demanded, his voice ringing with a frustration born of impotence. He was a champion of battle, a man whose entire identity was built on overcoming challenges with power. But how do you punch a concept? You cannot, Cassian stated flatly. Any energy you throw at it, a Draco meteor, a hydro cannon, a Gigantamax explosion, it will simply consume. It feeds on power. It feeds on emotion. To fight it is to feed it. A heavy, desperate silence fell over the assembled leaders of the Pokémon world. They were generals without armies, champions without their ultimate weapons, facing an enemy that grew stronger the more they struggled. It was in that moment of despair that Ash found his clarity. He looked from the terrified faces on the screens to his own Pokémon, who had gathered around him. Pikachu was on his shoulder, his cheeks crackling with defiant energy. Lucario stood beside him, a calm, steadying presence. Infernape, Sceptile, all of them, their eyes were fixed on him, filled not with fear, but with an unwavering, absolute trust. They had faced down gods before. They had stared into the abyss. They had never backed down. We can't fight it, Ash said, his voice cutting through the silence, drawing every eye. Cassian is right, we can't attack it head-on. Not with power. He looked towards the great crater of Paldea, towards the source of the silence. When I was in the storm in Galar, he continued, his voice gaining strength, I couldn't fight that either. It was pure emotion, pain and anger, so I didn't fight it. I showed it something else. I showed it my bonds. My memories. Cynthia's eyes widened slightly in understanding. You're suggesting a conceptual battle. I'm suggesting that this thing, the null, it only understands emptiness, Ash said, a fierce conviction solidifying in his heart. It consumes everything because it is nothing. It doesn't know what a bond is. It doesn't understand trust, or love, or the stupid, reckless courage of a partner willing to take a hit for you. He looked at Serena, and she met his gaze, her eyes shining with a mixture of fear and absolute faith in him. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture that spoke volumes. I'm with you. The wave is spreading. It will cover the world eventually, Ash said, turning back to the holograms. Our only chance is to go to the source. To the wound in Area 0. I have to go down there and face it. Alone. That's suicide, Stephen Stone protested. We can assemble a team of the strongest Pokémon left in the world. And give it the biggest meal of its life. Ash countered. No, this isn't about overwhelming it. It's about showing it something it can't eat. Something it can't understand. He clenched his fist, his aura flaring around it like a blue flame, a defiant spark of color and life. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to fill its silence with so much noise it chokes on it. The decision was made. There were no other options. As the world's leaders began the impossible task of coordinating a global defense against the creeping silence, of trying to save the millions already lost, Ash's mission was set. He, Serena, and their Pokémon would descend once more into the heart of the world, to the place where reality was broken. They would not go as an army to wage war, but as a single, defiant voice to sing a song in the face of an all-consuming silence. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The God of Nothing. The second descent into Area 0 was a journey into a photograph's negative. The vibrant, living twilight of their first visit was gone, stolen. The great crystalline trees that had pulsed with soft, internal light were now just dull, gray quartz. The air, once humming with latent power, was thin and achingly cold, carrying a silence so profound it felt like a constant pressure on their ears. There were no roars from Paradox Pokémon, no rustling of unseen things in the alien foliage. There was only the soft crunch of their boots on the lifeless, crystalline ground. Their Pokémon walked close, a tight, protective formation around them. Pikachu was a warm, living weight on Ash's shoulder, but the usual crackle of his energy was subdued, a pilot light fighting against a gale. Serena's Delphox moved with her head low, the flame at the tip of her branch flickering weakly, a tiny ember of defiance in the oppressive gloom. Every one of them felt it. The creeping, spiritual hypothermia of the null's presence. It's like the whole place is holding its breath, Serena murmured, her own breath misting in the frigid air. Her voice sounded unnaturally loud, an intrusion on the sacred silence. No, Ash replied, his voice a low growl. He stopped, scanning the gray landscape. It's not holding its breath. It's dead. The psychological assault began without warning. It was subtle, insidious. As they crossed a bridge of solid, non-glowing crystal, a flicker of movement caught Serena's eye. Standing on the far side was her mother, Grace. She wasn't smiling. Her face was etched with a profound, weary disappointment. Still chasing after him, Serena? The Phantom asked, her voice echoing the girl's deepest insecurities. He's a champion, a legend. And what are you? You gave up on your dream to follow his. You are just a shadow he casts. You'll always be second. Serena flinched as if struck. The words were poison, crafted from the tiny, private fears she'd buried long ago. Delphox growled, stepping in front of her, but the illusion didn't waver. Serena, Ash said, his voice sharp but steady. He didn't look at the Phantom, only at her. Look at me, is that what you see? She looked at him, at his eyes which held no hint of superiority, only concern and unwavering partnership. She thought of him cheering for her at her performances, of him asking for her strategic advice, of the quiet moments where they were just equals. She took a shaky breath, the cold air burning her lungs. No, she said, her voice finding its strength. She looked back at the illusion, her eyes hard. My dream didn't shrink, it grew to include his. And I've never been stronger. As she spoke the words of truth, the phantom of her mother wavered, her form dissolving like smoke in the wind. The attack had failed. Next, it came for Ash. He saw himself standing on the Indigo Plateau, watching his Charizard refuse to battle. He saw himself at the Silver Conference, his hand outstretched as his tired Blaziken fell before Harrison's. He saw Paul, his cold, dismissive rival, walking away after their first humiliating defeat. The memories were real, but twisted. The phantom of Professor Oak appeared beside him, shaking his head. You've had so many chances, Ash, the phantom said sadly. So many powerful Pokémon, but you always fall short. You leave them, you move on. Your bond isn't a source of strength. It's a chain of goodbyes. A legacy of almosts. You're not a master. You're just a boy who can't finish what he starts. Pikachu shrieked in anger, his cheeks sparking furiously, but the null's power was in the truth it warped. Ash did leave his Pokémon. He did lose leagues. The phantom was built from the bricks of his own history. He felt a wave of despair wash over him, the crushing weight of every failure. Was he wrong to leave Charizard to train? A calm voice asked from beside him. Serena was there, her hand finding his. Or did that training make Charizard strong enough to save your life against Entei? Did leaving Greninja in Kalos weaken your bond, or did you trust him with a duty no one else could handle? She squeezed his hand, her warmth a shield against the cold whispers. Your story isn't about the losses, Ash. It's about how you always get back up. That's the bond I believe in. Her voice was the anchor. The phantoms of his past dissolved, unable to gain purchase against a truth reinforced by another. The null was learning. It could attack one of them, but the other's bond provided a defense. It could not break them while they were together. On the surface, in a makeshift command center at the crater's edge, the leaders of the world were watching their own kind of horror unfold. The silent zone was expanding, not as a wave, but as a creeping tide, claiming a few kilometers every hour. It was slow, relentless, and unstoppable. We have nothing, Leon said, his voice raw with frustration as he slammed a fist on the holographic console. Every projection shows the same result. At this rate, the entire planet will be silent in 3 months. Gita, her face pale but her resolve unbroken, made the call. Bring him. Valerius was escorted into the command center. He wasn't in chains, but the invisible weight of his guilt was a heavier burden than any prison. His sharp, militant posture was gone, replaced by the stoop of a broken man. He looked at the main screen, at the creeping gray tide of the silent zone, at the real-time data feeds showing millions of people and Pokémon turned into living statues. This was the purity he had sought. This was his great silence. It was a sterile, cosmic horror. He didn't speak for a long time. He just absorbed the data, his brilliant, analytical mind finally seeing the unvarnished truth. It's beautiful, isn't it? He whispered, the words so chillingly detached they silenced the room. Perfectly ordered, no chaos, no pain, no pointless struggle, just peace. He looked at the horrified faces of the champions. I was a fool. I saw the perfection of a starless midnight and called it the dawn. I didn't want to purify the bond. I wanted to erase the pain of its failure. My failure. He touched the screen, zooming in on the energy signature of the null. My research, my order's most secret texts, they spoke of the silence as a state of perfect balance. It cannot be destroyed by what it consumes. It is a thing of absolute zero. You cannot make it colder. But, he paused, a new, desperate light entering his eyes. What if you tried to make it hot and cold at the same time? He looked at Gita. I theorized that a paradoxical energy input, one that is fundamentally self-contradictory, could not be processed by a system as brutally logical as the null. It would be like feeding a calculator the concept of faith. It might not break the machine, but it would cause a momentary error in the calculation. A flaw in its perfect nothingness. What kind of paradoxical input? Cynthia asked, leaning forward, her voice tense. The bond I shared with the Metagross I lost, Valerius said, his voice cracking with a grief that was decades old but still raw. It was a bond of perfect love and pride, and it was the weapon I used to murder him. It was a source of supreme strength and unforgivable weakness. It is the ultimate paradox. My entire life, my entire ideology, is built upon it. He took a deep, shuddering breath. I cannot recreate that, but I have one bond left. My Agron. He is a creature of pure, unwavering loyalty. A testament to the purity I preached. And I am a traitor who led him, and the world, to the brink of this abyss. Our connection now, it is a paradox of loyalty and betrayal. Of love and failure. He looked at the champions, his violet eyes burning with a new, terrifying purpose. I can give you your opening. Ash Ketchum is in the heart of the beast, acting as the focal point. If I can use him as a conduit, I can project the entire essence of my bond with Agron directly into the null. It will be everything I am and everything I have lost. It will be a concept the god of nothing cannot digest. The implication was clear. To project everything meant leaving nothing behind. It will kill you, Stephen said quietly. A small price, Valerius replied, a bitter smile twisting his lips. For a man who has already murdered the world. Deeper in the crater, the null shifted its tactics. It could not break Ash and Serena's bond with illusions, so it attacked the bonds of their Pokémon directly. Lucario suddenly froze, his body rigid. Ash felt the psychic backlash, a wave of cold logic. Aura is just energy. The bond is a chemical reaction in the brain. There is no spirit. There is only the machine. Cease your pointless function. Lucario. Don't listen. Ash shouted, grabbing his partner's shoulders. He poured his own aura into him, not just the energy, but the feeling behind it. He sent the memory of their first meeting as a Riolu, the fierce pride of their first victory, the quiet understanding that passed between them without words. The aura isn't just energy. It's us. It's our spirit. Fight it. Lucario shuddered, a low whine escaping his throat. Then, his crimson eyes snapped back into focus, glowing with a renewed fire. He roared, unleashing a pulse of his own aura that shattered the psychic intrusion. He was back. Just as they recovered, Serena received the message from Gita on her datapad. Her face went pale as she read Valerius's plan. The sacrifice. The paradox. The infinitesimally small chance of success. Ash, she said, her voice tight. The cavalry is coming, sort of. She explained the plan. Ash listened, his face grim. He looked at the path ahead, which opened into the final, vast cavern at the bottom of Area 0. The null was there. It was larger now, a roiling, expanding sphere of perfect blackness that seemed to bend the very light around it. It hung in the air above the great crystal heart of Paldea, slowly leaching the life from it. So that's it, Ash said, his voice quiet. He creates a crack in the armor, and I have to be the one to break it. He looked at his Pokémon. They were exhausted, psychically battered, but they were resolute. He looked at Serena. She was afraid, but she was here. She put her hand on his cheek. You won't be alone, she said. When the time comes, we'll be your anchor. We'll be the noise. They took their positions at the edge of the final cavern, a tiny, defiant army before a silent god. Serena established a calm link, her Delphox creating a small psychic shield to protect the signal from the null's passive interference. We are in position, Serena reported to the surface. Ash is ready. In the command center, Valerius stood before a makeshift amplification array, wired to one of Gita's machines. His Aggron stood beside him, its scarred, powerful body perfectly still. It understood. Valerius placed a hand on his Pokemon's steely hide. There were no tears, no grand speeches. There was only a quiet, final understanding between a man and his last, most loyal friend. Aggron. For all my mistakes, Valerius whispered. Thank you. He nodded to Gita. She engaged the machine. Down in the cavern, Ash felt a new energy surge through him, channeled from the surface. But it wasn't clean power. It was a chaotic, agonizing torrent of emotion. He felt Valerius's pride in his first championship. He felt the sickening horror of watching his Metagross crumble. He felt the cold conviction of his crusade, the burning shame of his failure, the profound, unwavering love for the creature of steel standing beside him, and the final, quiet peace of acceptance. It was a lifetime of paradoxical agony and love, focused into a single, unbearable point of energy. The energy lanced out from Ash, a beam of pure, conceptual chaos, and struck the surface of the null. There was no sound, no explosion. The god of nothing simply faltered. For one single, solitary second, its perfect, light-consuming surface flickered. A visible ripple, a distortion like a glitch in a video feed, spread across its form. It was a moment of cosmic indigestion, a fatal error in its processing of reality. The null, for the first time in its timeless existence, was confronted with a piece of data it could neither consume nor comprehend. It was vulnerable. Ash saw it, the flaw in nothingness, the crack in the armor of the void. His eyes, and the eyes of every one of his Pokémon, began to glow. Not with the blue of Aura, or the rainbow of AZ Move, or the crimson of Dynamax. It was a new light, a pure, brilliant white. It was the color of a bond refined in the crucible at the end of the world. It was his turn. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Apex Bond. The flaw in the god of nothingness was not a hole. It was a question mark. A single, shimmering moment of logical paradox branded onto the skin of the void by the ghost of a broken man's love and failure. Valerius's sacrifice had not wounded the null, it had confused it. And in that confusion, a window had opened. It would not stay open for long. Ash felt the chaotic, paradoxical energy of Valerius's bond fade, its purpose served. Now, there was only the immense, pressing silence of the null, its attention focused entirely on him, the anomaly who had served as the conduit for its momentary befuddlement. The silence was no longer passive. It was inquisitive, hostile. It pressed in, seeking to understand and erase the source of the paradox. Ash, now. Serena's voice was a lifeline in the cold, a sharp, clear note in the crushing silence. She and her Pokémon stood behind him, a small island of warmth and light, their combined auras a shield against the null's encroaching despair. He took a breath. This was it. There would be no commands, no shouted attacks. This battle would be fought in the silent spaces of the heart. He closed his eyes and reached inward, not for a single source of power, but for the foundation of them all, his bond with Pikachu. He didn't think of the Z-move or the Gigantamax form. He thought of their beginning, in Professor Oak's lab. A stubborn, defiant little mouse who refused the confines of a Pokeball. The terror of the Spearow flock. The moment of shared desperation, of a boy shielding his new, difficult friend with his own body, and the explosive, world-changing thunderbolt born not of training, but of pure, protective instinct. He projected that memory, that feeling, into the void. This is a bond. The null answered with its only truth, the inevitability of the end. It showed him a vision of Pikachu, old and gray, his light faded, still. It showed him the heat death of the universe, the final, cold silence where no bonds could exist. It was a powerful argument. But Ash had a better one. He reached for his other partners, for the entire thrumming, chaotic, beautiful network of connections he had spent his life building. He felt the fiery pride of Charizard, the cool, ninja-like focus of Greninja, the unshakable loyalty of Snorlax, the wild spirit of Lycanroc, the fierce heart of Infernape. One by one, he layered their essences, their memories, into his projection. He was shouting in a vacuum, his voice swallowed by the immense emptiness. It wasn't enough. He was one boy, one nexus of bonds. The null was a god. He needed a choir. Serena, he called out, his eyes still closed, his body trembling with the strain. I need more noise. I need everyone. Serena understood instantly. She wasn't just his anchor, she was his amplifier. She held her datapad aloft, its comms channel still miraculously open. Listen to me, she broadcast, her voice ringing with an authority that seized the attention of every champion and professor in the command center. The null feeds on power, but it's confused by emotion. By the bonds themselves. We can't send attacks, so we have to send us. All of us. On the surface, a desperate, brilliant plan took shape. Cynthia's voice cut through the chaos. She's right. It's a conceptual battle. Link me to every trainer network, every social media feed, every emergency broadcast system on the planet. A new wave began to spread across the globe. Not a wave of silence, but a wave of memory. Of hope. Leon, broadcasting from a ruined Galar, didn't show his champion's face. He showed a memory of a young boy receiving his first Charmander, the tiny flame on its tail a promise of a grand adventure. Steven Stone sent not data, but the feeling of polishing a rare stone, the patient, quiet joy of revealing the beauty hidden within. From Alola, Kukui and Burnett projected the simple, perfect love of watching their son take his first steps. Serena became the conductor of a global orchestra of hope. She channeled the incoming flood of emotional energy, shielding Ash from the raw, chaotic deluge and focusing it into a coherent stream. Every memory of a first Pokémon, every tear shed at a heartfelt goodbye, every cheer at a hard-won victory, every quiet moment of a trainer brushing their partner's fur, it all flowed through her and then into Ash. He felt it, a tidal wave of shared experience, a billion voices rising in defiance of the silence. He was no longer a single point of light. He was a supernova. The strain was immense, threatening to tear his consciousness apart, but his own bonds, his own Pokémon standing guard around him, were his unbreakable core. Now, it was time. The power he had gathered was not something he could command. It was something he had to become. He started with the foundation. The pure, blue light of his own aura erupted from his body, no longer a shield, but a framework. It was the fundamental language of his connection to all living things. Then came the first instrument of his symphony, Mega Evolution. He channeled the infinity energy, the raw power of the bond made manifest. It was not aimed at Lucario, but integrated into the aura framework. A silver-blue lattice of focused will, the energy of potential unlocked, formed around him. Mega Lucario, standing beside him, pulsed with the same light, his form becoming a living extension of that concept, a blade of perfect focus. Next, the wild, untamed heartbeat of AZ Move. The vibrant, chaotic energy of Alola, a power born of nature and faith, surged through the lattice. It was the lifeblood of the symphony, raw and emotional. Pikachu became its vessel, his body blazing not with electricity, but with the pure, multicolored light of AZ Crystal, a son of indomitable spirit. Then, the cosmic scale of Dynamax. The Galar particles, the energy of growth and immensity, did not make him a giant. It gave the symphony its breadth, its scope. It was the feeling of standing before something vast and ancient, a power that shaped the very landscape. Snorlax, solid and unmoving, embodied this, not as a giant, but as a mountain of unwavering loyalty, an immovable concept of presence. Finally, the crystalline logic of terastallization. The fundamental, earth-bound energy of Paldea, the power to change one's very essence, formed the final layer. It was a brilliant, multifaceted shell around the raging energies within, giving them form and clarity. Greninja, sleek and fluid, shimmered with this light, a phantom of perfect adaptation, his essence shifting to become whatever the moment required. He was no longer Ash Ketchum, trainer. He was Ash Ketchum, Nexus. A living, breathing embodiment of the apex bond. A temporary state of transcendence where the four gimmicks were not separate powers to be used, but a single, unified language of connection, with his own spirit as the syntax. The light radiating from him was a blinding, perfect white, a fusion of all colors, all energies. His Pokémon were no longer standing beside him, their forms were indistinct, flowing into the light, their individual consciousnesses all part of the same song. The Null, the god of nothing, recoiled. This was an affront, a violation of its fundamental nature. It could not consume this light. It was not energy to be eaten. It was a story, a truth, And it was a truth that contradicted the null's entire existence. Ash, the Apex Master, took a step forward. And he did not project an attack. He projected a memory. He showed the null the simple, perfect weight of a trusted partner asleep in his lap after a long journey. He showed it the taste of a shared poffin, the sticky sweetness, a moment of shared joy between a boy and his Buizel. He showed it the warmth of a fire on a cold night in the Sinnoh Mountains, his Pokémon huddled close, their combined body heat a shield against the world. He showed it the fierce, terrifying pride of seeing his Gible finally master Draco Meteor. He showed it the quiet, unspoken conversation in a glance shared with Serena across a battlefield. He showed it the feeling of 100 Pokémon he had befriended, from the smallest Caterpie to the mightiest legendary, their faces, their voices, their triumphs and their pains, all of it. He pushed a lifetime of noise, of color, of love, of pain, of stupid, reckless, heartbreaking, beautiful something into the perfect, sterile, logical nothing. He showed the god of nothingness the power of a scraped knee, of a tearful goodbye, of a triumphant hello. He showed it the meaning of the word, friend. The null could not process the data. It could not erase a memory that had already happened. It could not consume a feeling. The white light of the apex bond washed over it, and the god of nothingness did not scream, or explode, or die. It simply got smaller. The perfect black sphere began to recede, contracting in upon itself. The light of the apex bond was not destroying it, it was balancing it. It was filling the void, not with power, but with meaning. He was showing the ultimate entropy, the one thing it could never create on its own, a reason to exist. The null shrank, from the size of a mountain to the size of a house, then to the size of a man. It pulled the edges of its own wound in reality together, sealing the dimensional tear not with force, but with the sheer need to get away from this incomprehensible, overwhelming noise. It retreated back into the conceptual space between realities, the place from which it had come. The last thing Ash projected, as the final sliver of the void vanished, was a single, simple image. A young boy, on the first day of his journey, holding a small, yellow mouse in his arms, both of them battered, exhausted, and utterly defiant in the face of a raging storm. A promise. We'll be okay. Together. The void was gone. The brilliant white light that was the apex bond shattered, its purpose fulfilled. The immense power, borrowed from a billion souls, retreated, leaving Ash standing in the sudden, shocking silence of its absence. The symphony was over. He swayed on his feet, the world swimming back into focus. He was just Ash again. The strain of becoming a living god, even for a moment, was catastrophic. Every muscle in his body screamed. His consciousness frayed at the edges. He felt Pikachu, Greninja, all of them, disconnect from his mind, their presences returning to their own bodies, all of them drained and exhausted. The silence of the cavern was broken by a single, defiant sound, the frantic, terrified beat of a human heart. His own. He pitched forward, his vision going black, and collapsed onto the cold, crystalline floor. The last thing he felt before unconsciousness took him was Serena's arms catching him, her voice, choked with tears and relief, whispering his name. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Unwritten Page. He woke to the sound of the sea. It was a gentle, rhythmic shushing, a sound that had been the background music to some of the happiest moments of his life. The air was warm and carried the scent of salt and plumeria. He wasn't in a sterile hospital room or a cold, subterranean cavern. He was in a familiar bed, the soft Alolan sunlight filtering through bamboo blinds, painting stripes of gold across a simple wooden floor. He tried to sit up, and a groan escaped his lips. Every muscle, every joint, every cell in his body felt like it had been run through a grinder, then struck by lightning. It was a deep, profound ache that went beyond simple exhaustion. It was the echo of divinity, the price for borrowing the power of a billion souls. Easy there. Serena's voice was soft, close. She was sitting in a chair beside the bed, a book lying open but unread in her lap. Her eyes were shadowed with weariness, but they shone with a relief so fierce it was almost painful to look at. She put a cool hand on his forehead. "You've been out for 3 days. 3 days. His own voice was a dry, unused rasp. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, his feet finding the floor. The simple act left him light-headed. "The null, is it? It's gone," she said, her voice catching slightly. "You did it, Ash. You saved everyone." The words felt too big, too heavy to fit in the quiet, peaceful room. He looked down at his hands. They were just his hands. They didn't feel like the hands of a savior. They just felt tired. Pikachu, who had been asleep at the foot of the bed, stirred and let out a weak but happy chaw, nudging his head against Ash's ankle. Later, they sat on the lanai of Kukui and Burnett's house. The world looked normal. The sky was a brilliant blue, the sea sparkled, and young Lei was happily chasing a friendly rockruff on the beach. But it was a fragile normality. A new kind of quiet had settled over the world. Kukui joined them, handing Ash a tall glass of pineapple juice. The professor looked older, the weight of the last few days having carved new lines into his face. "The silent zones are receding," Kukui explained, leaning against the railing and looking out at the sea. "It's slow, like a tide going out in reverse. People and Pokemon are waking up. But they're not the same. It's like a vital spark has been dimmed. They're quiet, listless. Doctors think it might be a form of spiritual shock. It could take years for them to fully recover. Maybe they never will." "And the gimmicks?" Ash asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. He already knew the answer. He could feel it in the dead weight of the Z-ring on Kukui's wrist, in the cold, inert feeling where his own connection to Mega Evolution and Dynamax used to be. "Gone," Kukui confirmed with a sad, final nod. "Mega stones are just rocks. The power spots in Galar are dormant. Z crystals are opaque. You didn't just push the null back, Ash. The final wave of your own power, the apex bond, it seems to have acted as a global reset. It stabilized the world by burning out the excess, volatile energies the null was drawn to. You balanced the equation." It was the ultimate irony. In his final act to save the powers he had mastered, he had been the one to erase them. A quiet, necessary sacrifice. Valerius's original, fanatical goal had been achieved, not by his hate, but by Ash's love. A holographic screen shimmered into existence beside them. It showed the faces of Cynthia, Stephen, Leon, Diantha, and Gita, assembled for a formal conference. At the edge of the screen was another man, his face grim and weary, Cassian. "Ash," Cynthia began, her voice formal but laced with a deep, personal warmth. "The world owes you a debt that can never be repaid. We have reviewed Cassian's data, and we now understand the full scope of what you faced. And what you did. Valerius's sacrifice gave us the opening," Leon added, his usual bravado gone, replaced by a somber respect. "He has been memorialized. Not as a hero, but as a man who chose to pay the ultimate price to correct an apocalyptic mistake. Cassian and the other members of the Order who mutinied are now working with our global alliance, helping to undo the damage their ideology caused." Cassian gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. He did not look like a man who had been granted clemency. He looked like a man serving a life sentence of his own making. "The world has changed," Stephen Stone said, his voice resonating with authority. "We were unprepared for a threat of this magnitude. We cannot allow ourselves to be so vulnerable again. Which is why we have formed a new global initiative. The Aegis Program, a task force with unprecedented authority to monitor and respond to paranormal, dimensional, and conceptual threats to our world." Gita looked at Ash, her expression direct and unwavering. "The program needs a leader. Someone who understands these forces not just academically, but intuitively. Someone who has faced a god and made it blink. Someone the world will trust." The offer hung in the air, heavier than any crown. Head of the Aegis Program. A desk, a title, a legion of staff and researchers. A position of immense power and crushing responsibility. It was a logical conclusion. It was a sensible cage. Ash looked away from the faces of the champions, his gaze drifting to the beach. He saw Lei fall down, scraping his knee. The toddler's face crumpled, a wail of pain and surprise building in his chest. But before a sound could escape, the rockruff was there, licking his face, nudging him with its soft head until the tears were forgotten, replaced by a watery giggle. A simple bond, a small, perfect moment of connection. That was the world he had fought for. He thought of his journey. The long roads, the dusty trails, the feeling of the wind in his face as he raced towards the next town, the next gym, the next adventure. His strength had never come from a command center. It had come from the dirt under his fingernails, from the unexpected friendships forged in the heat of battle, from the freedom to simply move forward, to see what was over the next hill. To accept their offer would be to stop moving. He would become a symbol, a statue. The apex master, frozen in his greatest victory. He would cease to be Ash Ketchum, trainer. He looked at Serena. She was watching him, not the screen, and he knew she had already arrived at the same conclusion. She saw the trap in the honor they were offering. Her smile was small, but it was all the encouragement he needed. He turned back to the screen, and the champions of the world fell silent, waiting for his answer. "Thank you," he said, his voice clear and steady, "but I can't." A murmur of surprise went through the assembled leaders. Leon looked genuinely shocked. "Ash, you don't understand the scope of this," he began. "No, I do," Ash interrupted gently. "That's why I have to say no. The power I have, it doesn't come from me. It comes from them." He gestured to Pikachu, who was now chasing the Rockruff alongside Lei. "It comes from the road. From meeting new people, new Pokemon. From getting into trouble and finding a way out of it together. If I sit at a desk, if I become a commander, that all stops. The part of me that you need, the part that saved the world, it would die in that office." He stood up, walking to the edge of the lanai, the sea breeze ruffling his hair. "I'm not a commander. I'm not a symbol. I'm a Pokemon trainer. My journey is my purpose, and it's not over." There was a long silence. It was Cynthia who finally broke it, a slow, knowing smile spreading across her face. Of all of them, she understood. She had walked her own path of scholarship and myth, and knew the value of freedom. "We should have known you'd say that," she said, her voice filled with a profound respect. "The world will be a little less safe without you in charge, Ash Ketchum. But I think it will be a lot better off with you in it." The others slowly began to nod in agreement, their initial surprise replaced by a dawning understanding. They were trying to cage the very force of nature they were hoping to harness. The conference ended, and the world was left to its healing. That evening, Ash and Serena walked along the beach, the waves washing the sand from beneath their feet. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple. The world was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet now, not an empty one. "Are you sure?" Serena asked, though she already knew the answer. "I've never been more sure of anything," he replied. He stopped, turning to face her. The setting sun cast her in a golden light. "What about you, Kalo's queen, your performances?" "My dream was never about the crown," she said, her voice soft but certain. "It was about finding a way to make people smile, to connect with them, and I realized, my biggest stage has always been right next to you." She took his hand, her fingers lacing with his. The gesture was as natural as breathing. "Where we go, the smiles seem to follow. Usually after a lot of explosions and near-death experiences, but still." He laughed, a real, unburdened sound. "So what's next for us?" She looked out at the horizon, at the vast, open ocean where the sun was meeting the sea. "I saw a map in Gita's command center. A new region they just started surveying. It's far to the south, past oceans no one has ever charted. Most of it is still just a blank space, an unwritten page." He followed her gaze, his eyes shining with a familiar, unquenchable fire. A blank map, a new adventure, the two greatest invitations in the world. The ache in his bones was still there, but for the first time in days, it was overshadowed by the familiar, restless itch in his feet. The call of the road. "Ready for a new adventure?" he asked, his voice filled with the promise of 1,000 tomorrows. Serena leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the last sliver of the sun dip below the horizon. Always, together, with Pikachu on his familiar perch, they stood and watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. They were not a commander and his consort. They were not a legend and his shadow. They were just two trainers, hand in hand, at the edge of the world, ready to turn the page and start a new chapter. Chapter 10 End.